We'll call the meeting to order. This meeting has been properly noticed and having the agendas placed on the board's website. Don Royston has been reappointed to the board for another 3-year term. It was previously announced that Trey Watkins had been reappointed for a 3-year term as well. And we welcome Gay Moon as the newest board member. She replaces Troy Brewer and is one of the representatives from Middle Tennessee. So welcome aboard. I think you met the other board members yesterday. So there were 2 formal hearings scheduled for today. One has been settled, and the proposed disposition is included in the Enforcement Committee report. The other has been continued until the January meeting due to the illness in the respondent's family. Therefore, we will not have any formal hearings today. Please speak into the microphones. If the red light is not on, you're not being recorded. And Mark, you want to introduce Denise?
Certainly. Denise, if you'll stand up. This is Denise Hickerson. She is our newest staff member. She is replacing Pat Turner. She is an AARB 3. She will be in charge of day-to-day operations. She is more or less the office manager. She has a great deal of experience. She actually worked for Governor Lamar Alexander as his administrative assistant. So we welcome Denise and hope that you all will make her welcome if you have any questions. I'm sure that she'll be able to answer them after a month or so. Give her a little time. She's only been here long enough to figure out where the coffee pot is and where the restrooms are. So, Denise, anything you want to add?
No, I'm just happy to be here, blessed to have the position.
Welcome, Denise. Please take a moment to sign your timesheets and give them to Karen, and also along with your receipts for travel and hotel, so that she can get them entered into the Edison system. First item is approval of the minutes. They've been distributed ahead of time. Are there any additions or corrections? Is there a motion for approval, please?
So moved. Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Approved. The committee appointments are to be need to be approved by the board. You've seen a list of them prior to the meeting, and they were functioning yesterday. Is there a motion to approve these appointments?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor of the committee appointments signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Executive Director report. Mark.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You have the Executive Director's report in front of you. Just a couple of things that I'd like to highlight for you. I have enjoyed being chair of the Executive Directors Committee. My term ends at the annual meeting this year, November the 5th. I will serve on the committee an additional year as the past chair, but I will not be required to do any extended travel. All I'll be required to do is go to the committee meetings themselves. This has really been an educational year for me. I've learned a lot about the way the NASBA Board of Directors works. I've made some good connections. I believe that I have represented Tennessee well and voiced your concerns and your positions. Thank you for the opportunity to serve. I really enjoyed it. If you don't mind, on the Executive Director's Report, number 4, proposed future meeting dates, if you would look at that, we will need to adopt these so that we can get them on the website and to the department so that we can schedule ALJs as appropriate for formal hearings. I bring your attention to number 6, the legislation that has been signed into law which affect the Board of Accountancy. We will be addressing Public Chapter 881, a little bit later in the agenda. We do need to have a formalized response to this for the department, since that needs to go to the commissioner before December 31st, and you will not meet again before that time. The other one that I'd talk to you about is Public Chapter 763, the professional privilege tax issue. Department of Revenue is not yet sending us notifications, even though the 90 days has passed. We have the old notifications from last year, but we've not received any new ones. I understand they're working on it. This is one of those cases where if you do not pay your professional privilege tax, technically, we are not supposed to renew your license. Now, the department has indicated that they will let someone go online and renew and pay the money, but then not issue a license. So we're going to have some unhappy CPA licensees out there once they figure out that we've got their money and they don't have a license. So be prepared for that. Let's move on down to number 8, the initial applications. There is a statutory change that is now requiring that all new applicants for licensure fill out an eligibility verification form. I included that for your review, just in case you get questions about it. It is required. It is going to be part of the applications for all Reg Board licenses. So it's going to be in addition to our application form. And last but not least, I have attached the focus questions for NASBA for this quarter. They were due on the 15th, by the 14th. I did contact Jimmy Burks, our Southeast Regional Director, and he said, if your board wants to vote on them on Friday, we'll take them Friday afternoon once you all have looked at them. So if you don't mind, take a minute to look at those. I have drafted responses. If there's something that you'd like to change or additions you'd like to make, now is your opportunity before I submit these. I am going to submit them as being adopted by the board.
We need to approve the meeting dates.
Need to approve the meeting dates and the focus questions, if you don't mind.
Is there a motion to approve the meeting dates as outlined in Mark's report?
So moved.
Question, there's one on, sorry,
Second to the motion?
second, sir, excuse me.
Any discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Mark, your term as the chair of the Executive Director's NASBA Committee is over. I thought, and you made reference that you'll continue to go to the meetings, so the travel and out of the office time will continue?
No, sir. I have been required to attend NASBA board meetings and quarterly business review meetings and various other meetings as chair of the committee. Once my term ends, the only meetings I'm required to attend are the Executive Director's Committee meetings.
How many of those are there?
We normally meet, we'll have a teleconference probably in January. We may have a face-to-face meeting at the regionals in June. And that's probably it, Bill.
So you've reflected that in the travel budget?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Comment that you made regarding the privilege tax, if you don't pay the privilege tax, you can't have your license renewed. Isn't there a problem with people not getting a notice to pay the privilege tax? At least I didn't get one.
Yeah, the Department of Revenue is no longer sending out notices. They've put it on their website, and you are to renew and pay, you're to pay the privilege tax online. That's the way they're doing it. They have that authority. We have put it on our website to encourage people to be sure they pay their professional privilege tax, but there's nothing more that we can do.
Questions to Mark regarding his response to the NASBA questionnaire? Everybody had a chance to look at it? I didn't realize it needed the board approval. A motion to approve the response?
So moved.
Second.
Questions or discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Jennifer, do you want to review with us the NASBA committee report, please?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've served on the Legislative Support Committee of NASBA this year. It's gone through many different committee changes, and that's its current name. And I just thought I'd give you a really brief summary of what we've done this year and what to expect in the months ahead. I've updated you in the past on the bill tracking online service that they have. I think this was the second year it was in effect, really the first when it was fully functioning. If you go to the NASBA website, you can click on this online tracking, and it pulls up a map of the United States. You can go to Tennessee, and you can see the bills that they have identified, and you can actually pull up the legislation and read the text. It's a great tool if you're really wanting to monitor what's going on in this state or any other state. And during the 2014 legislative session, more than 750 Board of Accountancy related bills were identified and monitored. And 233 of those were identified as high priority. So you can see they're really gathering everything and tracking it and trying to make it easy for boards to keep up with what's going on, both nationally and within the states. And beyond just kind of being a great information source, NASBA sees this as a great way to, have communication between boards, to use and share information when boards are tackling complex legislative issues. So if you see that something's going on with your state, you can see other states that may be going through the same issue, and you can communicate and maybe rely on lessons learned by other people that have previously been where your state may be going. The committee's been working on establishing a legislative affairs network, working with various organizations. I think last meeting you heard from the society about it's called the State Society Relations Committee, where they're working to increase communications and relations with state societies. They're establishing core groups with various groups like the state societies, the AICPA, the TAC, the Congressional CPA Caucus, and they're also establishing a key person contact system. After the midterm elections in November, I think everybody will be receiving an email asking you to fill out a form as to who your relationships and key contacts may be. They're trying to put together, like, if something's happening up on the Hill that affects accountants, they want to know who they can mobilize to go talk to various legislators, both nationally and on a state level. So watch your emails for that, and if you want to participate and provide information about various administrative and legislative relationships that you have both here and nationally, I know they would appreciate that. And that concludes my report.
Very good. Questions of Jennifer? Thank you. We need to, I guess, take a brief recess because we can't do anything until 9 o'clock.
Yes, sir. That would be correct.
But we can't go into the other reports.
No, we can't do any of the other reports or the hearings because they're set for 9 o'clock and after, so.
Sometimes being efficient doesn't pay off. We'll be back and reconvene at 9 o'clock. Rulemaking hearing. Chris?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, members of the board. This rulemaking hearing before the Tennessee State Board of Accountancy is hereby called to order. My name is Chris Whitaker, and I serve as Assistant General Counsel for the Tennessee State Board of Accountancy in the Department of Commerce and Insurance Regulatory Boards Division. The Executive Director and the board members who are agency representatives present today introduce themselves for the record.
Executive Director Mark Crocker.
Charlene Spiceland.
Jennifer Brundage.
Stephen Eldridge.
Casey Stewart.
Henry Hoss.
Bill Blofus.
Don Royston.
Vic Alexander.
Gabe Roberts.
Gay Moon.
We'd like the record to reflect that board member Trey Watkins is not with us today. However, there still is a quorum of the Board of Accountancy to transact business. Today is Friday, October the 17th, 2014. This rulemaking hearing is taking place pursuant to TCA 4-5-204 in Conference Room 1A of the Davy Crockett Tower, 500 James Robertson Parkway, Nashville, Tennessee, 37243. The purpose of this rulemaking hearing is to solicit comments on proposed rules that the Tennessee State Board of Accountancy has made public in order to clarify when the board may assess continuing professional education, or CPE, hours against licensees who fail to complete the required number of CPE hours in a biennial renewal period, to explicitly authorize the board to impose discipline against a licensee who fails to timely pay his or her professional privilege taxes required by law, and to create an expedited process for license renewal for certain members of the military and their spouses. A rule is defined as an agency statement of general applicability that implements or prescribes law or policy or describes the procedures or practice requirements of the agency. Proposed rules are filed with the Office of the Secretary of State, notice is given to the public for comment, and a rulemaking hearing is held. Upon conclusion of the hearing and the adoption of the proposed rules, the rules are forwarded to the Attorney General's office to be reviewed for legality. If approved, they are filed with the Secretary of State, which is responsible for publication, and the Government Operations Committee of the General Assembly. The rules must stay in the Secretary of State's office for 75 days, at the end of which time will be the effective date for the rules. Any members of the public wishing to speak regarding these rules should sign in at the table at the back of the room or, well, only those who have signed in will be permitted to speak. However, for the record, it appears that there's no one present to comment upon these rules, and for the record, neither myself nor Executive Director Crocker have received any written comments regarding these rules. Therefore, there will be nothing read into the record in that regard. The notice of rulemaking hearing, including the entire text of these proposed rule changes, was filed on August 13th, 2014, and it was listed in the August 2014 edition of the Tennessee Administrative Register. Additionally, the board approved this rulemaking hearing and the regulatory flexibility analysis relative to these rules on May 2nd, 2014. Mr. Crocker, for the record, what additional notice was given to affected individuals or groups?
The notice of rulemaking hearing was posted on the Tennessee Secretary of State's website on August the 18th, 2014, and it was posted on the Tennessee State Board of Accountancy's website on August 18th, 2014. Additionally, for licensees who have opted in under TCA Section 4-3-1306D to receive electronic notice via email of changes which may affect their license, the email opt-in notice, which included a link to the notice of rulemaking hearing, was posted and sent on August the 18th, 2014.
Thank you, Mr. Crocker. At this time, I will now read the substance of the proposed rules into the record, and all of the board members should have the notice of rulemaking hearing document before you on their iPads. So I will not read these changes word for word. I'll summarize the changes to the respective rules, and if any board member has questions regarding these rules that were previously approved, I'll be glad to take them when I'm done reading.
Chris, are we talking about the document that says language for proposed rule changes? Is that the right document?
The actual document which was filed with the Secretary of State is under Notice of Rulemaking Hearing. That's the formal document. The document you were referencing were some notes that I'd made just kind of informally to kind of memorialize for myself and then also for the board members who considered these proposed changes at the prior meeting to kind of speak in plain English as to what's actually happening with them. But the actual language that will be a part of the rules, once approved, is in the Notice of Rulemaking Hearing document on your iPad. The first proposed change is to Rule 0020-01-.08 regarding renewal of licenses. That rule is amended by adding a new paragraph 8, and there's quite a bit of verbiage here. Essentially, the new paragraph 8 and then the subsections thereunder create an expedited process for any licensee who is a active duty member of the military and or is called to active duty to be able to expedite the renewal of his or her license, and in some cases, depending on the circumstances, could be for their spouse as well if they're a licensee. I will assume that the board members can read that language for themselves and will tender any questions appropriately. The second proposed rule change is to Rule 0020-4-.03 regarding grounds for disciplinary action against licensees. It's amended by adding a new paragraph C9, which now explicitly provides failure to timely pay professional privilege tax as required by law as an independent disciplinary ground for the board to impose discipline against a licensee. Previously, the board sought discipline against such licensees under the Professional Privilege Tax Statute in Title 67 and also the Discreditable Act rule in the Accountancy Act. However, the iteration of the board that approved these changes felt that it would be more fair and clear to licensees to give them specific notice that failure to timely pay privilege tax could subject them to discipline. The final proposed change is to Rule 0020-05-.08 regarding failure to meet CPE requirements. The amendments to this rule clear up some potential ambiguity that once existed as to the circumstances under which the board may impose penalty hours of CPE for licensees who do not complete the required 80 hours or any subset of those 80 hours within the required 2-year time period. Paragraph 1, new paragraph 1 states that a penalty of 8 CPE hours may be assessed for failure to complete the 80 hours in 2 years. Paragraph 2 authorizes a penalty for failure to complete the 40-hour requirement in the subject areas of accounting, ethics, attest, and so on. Paragraph 3 authorizes a penalty for failure to complete at least 20 hours in each year of the biennial renewal period. Paragraph 4 authorizes a penalty for failure to complete the 20-hour requirement under Rule 0020-5-.03. Paragraph 5 authorizes a penalty for failure to timely complete the 2-hour state-specific ethics course. And then paragraph 6 states that a licensee who is assessed a penalty under this rule shall submit proof of completion of the penalty to the board no later than 180 days from the date the board notifies the licensee of the deficiency. Pause momentarily to take any questions board members may have about the proposed rule changes themselves, and then there'll be some other matters to be read into the record.
Chris, at the bottom, it indicates October 2011. Could you explain that, please?
Yes, sir. The notation in the bottom left-hand corner, SS-7037, parentheses, October 2011, that is the October 2011 version of the Notice of Rulemaking Hearing form issued by the Secretary of State's office. It's my understanding that there is a new form that will be used for future rulemaking hearings. It looks almost identical, just some minor changes, but that is that's Secretary of State form number and notation, so it doesn't have anything to do with these rules. Hearing no questions at this time, I will now read the regulatory flexibility analysis, the economic impact statement, and the local government impact statements into the record. Pursuant to TCA 4-5-401, the Regulatory Flexibility Act, all agencies shall review all proposed rules and the effect that the proposed rules have on small businesses. This is a requirement for any rulemaking hearing, and there is a list of factors that the board must consider regarding the regulatory flexibility analysis, and I will address each of those rules in turn, or those factors in turn, excuse me. The agency shall consider, but not be limited to, each of the following methods of reducing the impact of the proposed rules on small businesses while remaining consistent with the health, safety, and well-being of the public. Number one, overlap, duplicate, or conflict with other federal, state, and local government rules. There is no overlap, duplication, or conflict with other federal, state, or local government rules. Clarity, conciseness, and lack of ambiguity in the proposed rules. The rules are clear in purpose and intended execution. The implementation of the proposed rule change will increase clarity and conciseness and decrease ambiguity in the rules as a whole. Number three, flexible compliance and/or reporting requirements for small businesses. These rules do not create any new compliance or reporting requirements for small businesses. Number four, friendly schedules or deadlines for compliance and/or reporting requirements. The proposed military applicant rule will expedite the licensure process for certain military personnel and in some cases their spouses. Otherwise, these rules do not set out further compliance or reporting requirements for small businesses. Consolidation or simplification of compliance or reporting requirements. Again, there are no new compliance or reporting requirements as a result of these amendments. Number six, performance standards for small businesses. These rules do not set out operational or design standards. As such, there are no such standards for small businesses as a result of this amendment. And number seven, barriers or other effects that stifle entrepreneurial activity, curb innovation, or increase costs. It does not appear that these amendments will erect barriers or have other effects which would stifle entrepreneurial activity, curb innovation, or increase costs. This regulatory flexibility analysis was previously approved by the board on May the 2nd of 2014. Moving now to the economic impact statement as required by TCA 4-5-403. The economic impact statement requires that the following factors be considered and that the analysis for these proposed rules is as follows. The type or types of small businesses, an identification and estimate of the number of small businesses subject to the proposed rules that would bear the cost of or directly benefit from the proposed changes. CPA firms, especially smaller firms run by members of the military, will benefit from the military applicant rule because licensees who are members of the military would now have an expedited license application and/or renewal process in the event they are called to active duty. Number two, the projected recording, record-keeping, and other administrative costs required for compliance with the proposed rules, including the type of professional skills necessary for preparation of the report or record. The projected record-keeping, administrative, and recording costs, if any, are expected to be minimal. Number three, a statement of probable effect on impacted small businesses and consumers. Other than the previously mentioned benefit to members of the military running CPA firms, there are no other additional discernible effects anticipated. Number 4, a description of any less burdensome, intrusive, or costly alternative methods of achieving the purpose and objectives of the proposed rule that may exist and to what extent the alternative means might be less burdensome to small business. This item is not applicable. Item number 5, a comparison of the proposed rule with any federal or state counterparts. This item is also not applicable. And item number 6, analysis of the effect of possible exemption of small businesses from all or any part of the requirements contained in the proposed rules. If small firms run by military personnel were somehow to be exempted from these proposed changes, they would not see the benefit of the expedited license application and/or renewal process. That concludes the economic impact statement. And finally, the local government impact statement as required by TCA 4-5-228. These proposed rule changes are expected to have no financial impact on local governments. That concludes the summary of the proposed rules and the various analyses and statements required to adopt these rules under Tennessee law. I will now ask the board members to vote on the proposed rule changes as set forth in the notice of rulemaking hearing, including the regulatory flexibility analysis, economic impact statement, and local government impact statement previously read into the record by roll call vote. The proposed rule changes will be approved upon a majority vote of the board. So, Mr. Crocker, if you will take the roll call vote, please.
Dr. Spiceland,
Yes.
Ms. Brundage,
Yes.
Mr. Eldridge,
Yes.
Mr. Stewart,
Yes.
Mr. Haas,
Yes.
Mr. Blofus,
Yes.
Mr. Royston,
Yes.
Mr. Alexander,
Yes.
Mr. Roberts,
Yes.
Ms. Moon.
Yes.
Unanimous vote.
Thank you, Mr. Crocker. The proposed rule changes are hereby approved by the board and will be sent to the Attorney General's office to be reviewed for legality and, if approved, to the Secretary of State's office to obtain an effective date. That concludes this rulemaking hearing. I thank everyone for their participation today.
Thank you, Chris. With that, we'll proceed to board committee reports, law and rules. Charlene?
Yes, the Law and Rules Committee recommended first change in Law 0020-02-.02 under Education. 1B, we recommended that we change that to be, rather than not more than 3 semester hours or 4 quarter hours, to read not more than 6 semester hours or 8 quarter hours for internship programs towards the accounting requirement. And the rationale behind this, or justification for the change, is that many of the universities, in fact, all of them that I know of in the state of Tennessee, allow up to 6 hours of internship credit for accounting to count towards the degree. So right now we have a disconnect between what our law states and what the universities allow. So students are graduating assuming that they can count those hours towards accounting, but they're not able to based on the law.
Do you move approval?
So we would like approval for this law, or we recommend approval for this law to be changed.
For a second?
Second.
Questions regarding this issue? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Right, the second item that we were looking at was the Board of Accountancy policy statements. And it was brought to our attention that these policy statements, which were last reviewed, I believe, in July 25th or 2008, or at least that's the date that's on the policy statement, that these statements are out of date, and a number of them are no longer, they definitely need to be reviewed and brought up to date. And after we reviewed the document, we felt like our recommendation would be that staff go through this document and make some recommended changes to the document. And then we would review it again and decide, bring it back to the board to adopt. So we make a motion to let the staff review the policy statements and readdress this later.
Second?
Second.
Discussion? If you had a chance to review the policies, as Charlene mentioned, there are numerous out-of-date policies in there. The other question is, we have the law and rules, and the policies are items that has been adopted by prior boards as guidance to implement law and rules. The question is, are they needed? So that's part of what we need to address going forward, along with revisions.
Chairman, I'd like to ask a question. It seemed like that when we got into discussion back in January over fictitious names, that the executive director was following a policy where I believe he was allowed to approve these names on a case-by-case basis, and then all of a sudden we have one come in that he brings to the attention of the board, and at that point we find out that there's a policy in place where the executive director has been allocated the responsibility of approving these fictitious names. Is that part of this document? Is that one of the policies that we would have in place, Mark, in this policy statement? Are there other types of situations where we've allocated to the executive director responsibility for certain actions?
Yes, for example, under enforcement, we have the authority to issue a cease and desist letter as opposed to bringing a case to the board through the complaint process. So there are some indications there that the board has allocated responsibility to the ED or staff.
Would all of these that are not currently in this policy statement be added in as you all go through and review these?
Yes, sir. Mm-hmm.
I'd just, I guess, have a question or comment, and I mean, we've asked the staff to do this, but I wonder if it would be helpful. Bill, I know you seem to have an interest in this. Somebody to work with the staff that's, I guess, actually on the board, just as part of the editing, drafting, revision process, or are you planning to, I guess, work with Mark and others to, as this process happens, I guess? I'm volunteering you, Bill, to do that. If you
No, I'm sure that the staff would welcome any volunteers from the board to assist in this, and I'll be glad to participate. I need to acknowledge going into it, I have a bias. I question whether we need the policy statements at all. And the question is, if it needs to be a policy, why isn't it a rule?
Right, which was exactly what our committee discussed. So we didn't even know it existed. But then I look down here and see, like for number 3, the executive director and coordinators have the authority to approve courses. Well, of course, we don't want the board to approve courses. is that supposed to be a law? Or, this is a guiding, a guidance to that law. So obviously, I guess in looking at this, I can see that there is a need to have some kind of guidance to what we expect staff to do, but so that, I think, is the intent behind the policies.
Basically, the review is to come up with a roadmap for the staff as well as for the board to go by in making the board and our activities and responsibilities more efficient.
I think the danger is that if we don't review this regularly, particularly where we have something that they have been taking on and assuming is okay, and then somebody comes in and questions, and that was what was brought to our attention yesterday. It was the part about 20 hours. Do you remember where it was, Mark? You had brought...
Under the continuing professional education. Let's see here.
Here it is.
Number 2,
Right.
Charlene, 2-2.
Oh, yep. So it says here, the board continues to require a minimum of 20 hours with the carryover cannot be used to meet the 20 hours. But if that is not made law, someone could come in and question it. So sometimes we are accepting these things as policy when we perhaps need to make them law to avoid. So again, if we have a policy statement, it does need to be regularly reviewed.
Yes?
And this is something I mentioned in the committee yesterday that may be of some benefit to the board members that couldn't attend, but generally speaking, there's kind of a continuum. The closer something is to guidance, as you're terming it, as to how the administrative staff is to operate the office day to day, that's probably more in the nature of a policy. But the closer you get to affecting a licensee's substantive property rights or financial interest, specifically something like that, I mean, for example, if a licensee is told, no, you can't carry over, and they don't otherwise meet it, then do they have discipline coming? Is their license at issue now? And if that cannot be the case, that a licensee is brought before this board for disciplinary action solely on a policy that is not a rule. That cannot happen because it would not withstand a legal challenge. So anything that, again, affects a licensee's property right in their license or might cost them money as part of that, that needs to be a rule, if the board is inclined to keep it around.
Bill, I just think it could be very healthy for you to participate in this if you have the time and are willing to devote that time, and I would certainly appreciate your efforts if you would do that.
Appreciate that, but I think that assistance needs to be coordinated through this committee, and Charlene as the chair, and in close collaboration with Mark as he works on it.
Certainly.
And I'm sure Charlene would welcome anybody's.
I would
input.
welcome anyone. I think Jennifer also volunteered to assist, so
Right.
we would welcome your assistance too.
We have a motion to have the staff initiate a comprehensive review of the policy statements and propose alterations or clarifications and corrections to those policies and to consider which policies they might recommend to be deleted or new ones to be added. That was seconded. Is further discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to ask that in the future that this, whatever policy statement we have in place, this one or whatever subsequent statement we end up with, be part of the monthly, the quarterly meeting documents that we get. or that we have here on the iPad, that have that policy statement available for us to look at each time.
Certainly, Henry, it'll be on there.
That concludes the.
Very
law.
good. Thank you. To that point, Henry, they have been there. In 7 years on the board, I really didn't know the policy statements were there until the last meeting, and some reference was made to it, and I said, what are we talking about? So, anyway.
Mr. Chairman, before we leave the law and rules, this wasn't mentioned yesterday, but now that we have a vote to potentially make a change to the internship rule, I'd like to also request a board vote to approve a fix. It's a spelling error that I found in the book, but it's Rule 0020-05-.07. The caption is extension of time, but it's spelled EXTENTION, and it needs to be SION. I have no idea how that happened, but just would like to fix it. And also, if the board approves between now and the next meeting, for me to just kind of go through, I mean, it's probably healthy to do this once a year anyway, just to see if there's anything that could be brought to the board's attention at the January meeting to look at and consider for a potential rulemaking hearing, considering how long and involved a process it is to actually do that. Anytime there's one thing that could be changed, if there are others that could go along with that to get multiple things done at once, I think that's useful.
The correction of the spelling error needs to have board approval.
Yes, sir, it does, because it's going to have to go on the notice of rulemaking document.
Okay.
So,
Can we just do that with a motion?
motion second and approval, yes, sir.
Make that motion, sir.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Chris, is that actually an error in just printing, or is that, if you go back and look at the original documents that were approved?
This is just speculation because this rule was originally approved in 1999 when I was still an undergraduate. So my guess is that it was just a misspelling that slipped through in the original rule and the caption, because frankly, to the extent that more attention or less is paid regarding rule review, I would speculate that more focus is on the actual text of the rule rather than the caption. And so basically, if Microsoft Word didn't catch it, it might have just flown through.
Thank you.
We'll move on to the licensing committee. Stephen?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The committee had several items on the agenda yesterday. The first one, the committee recommends granting the request by Mr. Lipscomb Davis for a 9-month extension of his AUD section for the CPA exam. Mr. Davis passed it in audit in August. He passed in August audit in 2013 and got sick with meningitis and missed the reg section because he had to go to the hospital. As a result, his audit section of the exam expired, and he's asking for a 9-month extension.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
The second item we had is a request, or the committee recommends granting a request from Shirley Ford for a waiver of the 10-year CPA exam score expiration rule. Ms. Ford passed the CPA exam in 1989. She never was licensed as a CPA. In March of 2014, the rule changed. The new rule change requires that, or says that scores over 10 years will be expired. She's asking that we waive this request and grant her, I guess, keep her scores intact, and the committee recommends accepting this request.
Second to that motion?
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
The next item we have is a request from Julie James for a 1-month extension of the BEC portion so that she can retake the FAR section. Ms. James had some health issues and had made a 74 on the FAR portion, and she missed the window to reschedule and retake the exam, I believe, by 1 day. And so she's asking for a 1-month window. When we reviewed the request, it appears that the request was made I think the request would actually be, her 1-month request would be expired already based on that. So as a result, we extended and recommend the board to grant her a request of extending the BEC portion through the end of November. So through November 30th.
Second to that motion.
Second.
Discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
The next item we have, excuse me, is a request for exempt CPE sponsor status from the Middle Tennessee chapter of Construction Financial Management Association, the CFMA. And the committee recommended granting exempt status to this organization.
Mike, it was.
Give a little deal.
Give some color behind it.
We reviewed their, I guess, the summary of the past 8 or so meetings, and it appears that all the topics that they have were what we can, all the topics that for which they would have given credit were applicable, either as specialized knowledge, management advisory, other, well, not other, or in accounting. We also heard from a few of the representatives who, I believe one of them's here, if anyone has any questions from them, and the committee felt that what their programs were adequate to be considered as compliant CPE.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Further discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
As a side note to this, through our discussions with this request, the committee has asked management to put together a proposal to implement an annual audit process of all exempt sponsor or exempt status organizations. What we would anticipate this would require would be that they would pick a sample. I believe there's 29. Is it? How many was it yesterday? 20.
Close to 50, I think.
50.
Okay, close to 50. And they would just pick a sample similar to they do for the CPE process and ask them to submit their information, their sign-in sheets, the summaries of the meetings, and the description of the meeting to make sure that once we grant organizations exempt status, that they don't become watered down and not issuing non-compliant CPE. So we'll expect to hear that at our next meeting.
We'll have it ready for you.
Thank you. All right. Let's see. The next item we had was a firm application request from Miss Judy Valou. Ms. Valou submitted her application for a firm, and reviewing the information, I don't have the rule in front of me, but I don't have the rule number in front of me, but what it requires is that you receive 4 years of experience from a licensed CPA firm that is relevant to the field of accounting. And when we reviewed her information, it appeared that the 4 years of experience that Ms. Valou had submitted, it was with an unlicensed firm. So we decided to table the information to get more information. what the committee thought was, she does have a certified she is licensed as a CPA in the state of Tennessee, and there is an experience requirement with that. And so we do have the information presented to us, which you should have. I think everybody's got a copy. I've read this briefly this morning, and what it appears is there's no, y'all can correct me if I misinterpret the rules on this, but my understanding is to be a firm, you have to have experience in public accounting with compilations, reviews, and some sort of a test services. Is that correct for the?
Rule requires if you're going to sign off on a test services, you must have at least 2 years of financial reporting experience in the last 10 years.
From reviewing this, it doesn't appear that information or that experience is there. I'll open up for discussion on this. That was just kind of my quick interpretation or quick opinion from reading this morning.
What is management's recommendation on this request?
I believe that you can authorize Ms. Valou to open a firm and prepare tax returns. I don't think that you can allow her to do compilations or any type of a test function.
So to clarify, like you said, to open a firm that just does tax returns, you don't have to have any, obviously, the compilation and any attest experience, correct?
That's correct.
You could work in private accounting, doing payroll, for example, and still be qualified to have a tax firm.
Yes, exactly.
That wouldn't prevent her from doing bookkeeping in preparation of those tax returns, would it?
Compilation.
She wouldn't be issuing reports or anything like that. She'd just be compiling information to go into the tax return.
Henry, you have to be very careful in regard to allowing them to do bookkeeping, because when you get into bookkeeping, you get into actually preparing a compilation, whether you mean to or not. Remember, a compilation, if you prepare a trial balance, that is basically a compilation. So when you get into bookkeeping, how far can you go without crossing that line? It's a very delicate situation that you find yourself in.
Even if you don't issue an opinion letter?
Even if you don't issue an opinion letter.
How do you police that?
It's practically impossible, Bill.
Okay.
We do the best we can, but it's very difficult.
Mark, if I may ask you a question, if Ms. Valou were granted a permit under the circumstances that are being referenced here, would it be permissible for her to do tax work, but then to farm out any attest or other work to a firm with someone who does have that experience requirement, and her not be in violation that way?
Certainly.
Okay.
Certainly.
Let me, quick question. All right, and when we if the concern is that, there's a fine line between tax services and then when you start doing bookkeeping and compilation, we obviously issue permits for firm permits for just tax firms, correct?
Correct.
And I assume they do some bookkeeping, payroll, that sort of thing, QuickBooks consulting and all that sort of stuff.
When they say they're doing tax return prep, that we assume all they're doing is tax return prep.
I mean, there's no rule. If I have a tax firm, I can still do QuickBooks consulting, and I can do payroll, and I can do journal entries and all that sort of thing, and not have to be licensed as an attest firm.
If you're doing journal entries, you should be licensed as an attest firm.
Really?
In order to prepare a tax return, a lot of times with a very, very small business, you'd have to bring it to the level of a trial balance before you would put it into the Schedule C on the tax return.
And technically, you're performing a compilation, Henry.
So we may have a lot of firms out there that are doing this illegally,
But we're
basically.
just saying they're tax
But-
prep firms.
But we are not saying that, and I think the point is that we, as a board, really cannot approve this based on, we cannot approve the compilation because she has not fulfilled that requirement, even though she may decide to do that. that would be something that if they, someone complained and it came before, she would be in violation. However, she could, at any time, work with another firm for 2 years under their supervision and get this.
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
I would move that we grant Ms. Valou's firm application for a tax preparation firm. And then obviously, we would include in the correspondence that, she can always apply for an attestation firm after she gets the adequate experience.
Second.
Further discussion?
I
In the
guess I just have a
correspondence-
question here. If you've got a firm license, does the license itself say this is a license for tax only, or this is a license for tax and compilation, or is it just a license? In other words, does the license look the same? Is it worded the same?
The license looks the same, Casey.
How does the public know? I mean, if I walk in and I say, do my taxes, and then somebody said, and I have a business, and they're doing all that, how does the public know what this firm is licensed to do?
The public does, and it's up to the practitioner to let them know that they can't do attest functions.
I assume, obviously, to do those attest functions, you're going to have peer review. And I assume as part of the peer review process, it's reviewing her licensing and make sure she's got all the proper experience. I'm not a peer reviewer, but expert, but I would assume that
I'll let the peer review expert talk to that.
then we can't know. So that's what I'm trying to make sure is, and that's a good point, is we grant a license, what prohibits that person from doing compilations?
During the peer review process, the peer reviewer inquires with the firm as to whether they're properly licensed. The firm makes a representation that they are or that they're not. Guidance is changing, I believe, the beginning of 2015, in which the peer reviewer will have to see documentation of that licensing. So in the past, it's been an inquiry and a representation, and starting, I believe, the beginning of next year, proof will have to be provided.
But Mark has just said that our license says you're licensed to open a firm, and they're not going to be registered for the peer review process in the case of a QuickBooks Pro advisor that is working with individuals and helping them with their bookkeeping, that says I'm a tax preparation or I'm a whoever I am that's just a pro advisor, but I'm just a registered firm that's not doing any compilation.
Sounds like when they're renewing their license, they're indicating they're not doing a test work. Therefore, they're not enrolled in a peer review program. Let's go back to Henry's question just quickly, or I thought he laid it out pretty well when you're doing a financial statement for a tax return. In that case, Henry, are you issuing that financial statement to the client, or are you simply doing it to prepare their tax return?
No, they bring in check stubs and bank statements, and we compile that information together, come up with a trial balance, and then that trial balance flows into the Schedule C on the tax return. We don't issue any report.
Right. So that, I think, is okay. Mark, what is your thoughts on that? I mean, we see it, the client doesn't receive the financial statement to then be used by a third party. So
What if the client receives it, hey, can I get a copy of that?
the CPA should not, then they are issuing it.
That's right.
Or what if we get the QuickBooks version?
Okay.
And we say QuickBooks, there's others out there, but
So-
and we make the adjustments on an accountant's copy and give it back to them, or they give us the full version and we just give them the adjusted copy back.
So
We
there's-
haven't printed a financial statement. I'm asking for clarification.
Right.
I'm a
And-
licensed firm, but.
And and this gets, sometimes questions like this I forward to technical staff simply because it's a very fine line. It has been for years. I will say that the Accounting and Review Services Committee has just approved revisions to the SARS standards that now makes a pretty good fine line between a compilation engagement, and they've now added a new standard called a preparation standard, which I think is going to fix all of these fine line concerns, because now you'll be able to be engaged to prepare someone's financial statements, but that service will not fall under the peer review process.
I think that may be a good answer for this, but in doing a corporate tax return, I mean, there's a balance sheet has to go in there as part of that return, I believe, and I mean, you know, unless you're able to do that under the, I guess, exemption from peer review, I don't see how a practitioner could really provide corporate tax services to anybody.
As they are issuing it.
Yeah, I mean, it's being issued to the Internal Revenue Service, filed with them, and you give the client a copy, and so it's, I mean, there is a financial statement in that corporate tax return.
The CPA is signing the tax return as the preparer.
Not as the issuer. I have a corporate tax return done, and I provide the balance sheet. I have a separate CPA that does it. He never provides a balance sheet back to me, ever.
He does give you the return, though.
He gives me the
with its-
return, but he does not give me even a correction to mine. He gives me the return.
Still think you're compiling it, I mean, under the, unless this new standard takes
The
effect.
new standard will help. There's also provision currently under previous where you can issue the financial statements under the management use only provision of SARS. But to just prepare the financial statement, make it available to the client without a report is pushing it.
I think I would suggest that we have a motion and a second on the floor to approve this application. And in this process, I think we've raised expanded issues that need to be evaluated and reported back to the board as to staff's interpretation of what constitutes a compilation and this other standard that
I can also have our technical staff do kind of a write-up from that maybe you all better understand or can provide more than I can.
I think that would be very helpful.
Okay.
And share it with Mark and the staff.
Bill, can I ask one more question, Mark? Mark, when we issue a license, do we specify, it's like, let's say if this lady had come in and asked for this firm and sent in the experience requirements she had and said she's going to be a tax firm only, when we correspond back to them, I mean, obviously a license is a license is a license. They're all the same. There's no tax license versus a test license. Do we specify in the correspondence to them that you can only provide tax services? Or how do we handle that situation?
Can I
Okay.
ask one follow-on question? That doesn't she have to apply for a license specifying she's only going to do tax services? I mean, isn't that part of what Wendy's saying is what we rely on is what they tell us, that they're not going to provide a test services. Is that correct?
Exactly. And when she fills out the application, if you'll notice here, she's indicated that she wants to provide compilations. We will correspond with her and tell her that is not acceptable. She can only do tax prep and maybe a SARS 8 engagement.
I guess my point is do we need to deny this request and ask that she resubmit without the compilation?
It would be cleaner. Yes.
That's where I'm going with that. Because if we grant this request, then she's free to do whatever she wants to do.
If you grant it the way it's written, yes.
I guess with that said, I would rescind my motion and move that we deny this request and issue correspondence that if she wishes to apply as a non-attest firm, then we would recommend that.
Second. I withdraw the other second and put forth this
Second
second.
motion. Further discussion of the current motion on the floor? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? The motion carries.
It seems like that in the next several months that this whole situation over compilations is going to change.
It could, Henry. Let me review what the ARSC has done, and we'll see if that clarifies the difference between bookkeeping and compilations and all that.
Input from the TSCPA and what Wendy referred to.
Just for anybody's information, and Mark, yours, we have created a 2-hour webcast, and the chair of the ARS committee did that for us to kind of go over those changes that TSCPA has available, if anybody would like to review that.
Okay, is that?
Hello.
All right, the next item we had was a request from a Monica Kinson for a CPA application. And when reviewing the application, I guess a issue came up that her experience verification was from a CPA. However, the CPA was working, and she works for an unregistered or unlicensed firm that's a tax preparation firm. And after the committee had a lot of discussion about this and determined that we had two issues here. The one request that we have, the committee recommends accepting her application for CPA exam because the rules do not specify that the person providing the experience verification has to work for a licensed CPA firm. They just have to be in good standing as a CPA in the state of Tennessee. So the committee recommended granting her application for CPA exam license.
Second.
Second.
Further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
The issue that came out of this is that, and Chris, I may need some assistance on this. When we read through the rules, we have a tax preparation firm that is not a licensed CPA firm that has CPAs working for it that are licensed and preparing tax services. And the committee felt there may be a compliance issue with our laws for these types of firms. And that just kind of an example. These are like H&R Block or a Jackson Hewitt or a Joe's Tax Service that are not licensed as CPA firms. Chris, can you give us some more background on this?
I can certainly try. It's, as Mark mentioned yesterday, it's kind of been an issue brewing behind the scenes for a while, and it may be ripe in the coming year for some sort of larger picture addressing of the issue. Before I get started with that, though, I did want to bring a portion of the Accountancy Act to your attention. 62-1-113K, that no CPA issued a license under 107 shall perform attest services in any firm without a permit under 108. I think that's important because attest is a defined term in the Act itself. So that is another part of the reason why it doesn't appear that Ms. Kinson, this is a separate question of whether the place she was working has problems, but it's another reason that she would not have an issue because even if she had a license now and was working for this place, if she's not performing anything that looks like the attest function, it doesn't look like there'd be a violation there. So that's just something that I came across as I was reading through some of this stuff. In terms of the larger question relative to the firm, the rule that was discussed yesterday says it's Rule 0020-01-.11, subsection 1, and it says each CPA and or PA firm providing accounting services. Now bear in mind, accounting services is not a defined term in the Act. It is defined by rule, not statute. So just if you're looking for that particular definition in the Act, you're not going to find it. But at any rate, each CPA or PA firm providing accounting services, which if you go back to .01, includes accounting, test, tax, consulting, or management advisory services, shall obtain a permit, and so on and so forth. Now, I guess the question becomes whether this board wishes to take the position that companies such as H&R Block, Jackson Hewitt, and the like are actually CPA firms or should be considered to be CPA firms. Because it would seem that if that is the position, then every location like that in the state of Tennessee would have to have a permit from this board, and that's a lot. But if the board's position, however it gets there, is that H&R Block and pure tax prep and or bookkeeping services are not CPA firms or should not be considered as such, then the analysis would probably be different.
Just to clarify, that's if they hired a CPA, correct? I mean, they could have an office in the state of Tennessee that didn't have any CPAs working there, and they would not have to register that location.
I think that's accurate.
And to register a location, it would just be basically submitting, because if they were just going to do tax, it would just be submitting for, no.
No,
They'd
it's
have to do
it's
a-
not nearly that simple, because
Okay.
once you make that leap of classification, then in order to obtain a permit, every H&R Block office, or at least arguably the big office, wherever or whatever that is, would have to meet the firm permit requirements, including at least simple majority ownership by CPA owners licensed in some state. And I can just about guarantee that that's not the case. So.
And are we treating them any different than we are Joe Blow that wants to open a tax service and hire CPAs? And the answer is yes, I think, because if we find that out on the smaller individual firms, then we've got a case. Is that not accurate?
And
Yes.
But isn't the issue really whether or not this CPA at H&R Block holds themselves out as a CPA because they're not practicing with a registered firm? As I understand the law, in order for them to hold themselves out as a CPA, they need to be with in order to provide services to the public, they need to be with a registered firm, do they not?
Yes.
We just, remember yesterday we discussed that the only way to around this would be those license holders would have to relinquish their CPA license rather than.
Make them inactive.
Well, that's what I had asked Mark yesterday, if going inactive, he said no, he thought that you'd have to relinquish or surrender your license, I think is what you said.
And these firms are also advertising that CPAs are working for them.
My opinion is it's and that's why we brought it to the board's attention. This is a pretty significant issue, and I think that we probably need to do some more research on this and address this. I mean, could we ask management to put together a recommendation and, research some of the specifics on this and the ramifications of making a change or not making a change?
I think you brought up yesterday that we wanted NASBA to maybe weigh in on what other states are doing, because H&R Block is certainly everywhere, so.
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
All right. Let's go ahead and do the CPE. We had a CPE audit report presentation. We could briefly get some statistics, get that. You want to?
Yes, this year we audited 506 licensees. 34% of them used our new online CPE tracker. The others submitted their documents by mail or email. We had 90% of respondents who were compliant, whether they were compliant with no issues or with use of carryover, submitting penalty hours or late ethics. 9% of the licensees were not compliant, and they were given the advised what penalty hours and additional certificates they would need to submit within 180 days. Opened 5 complaints. These were folks who either did not respond to the audit or responded that they had no CPE.
Any questions about that?
I think it was very good that you prepared the report for the committee and for the board. It's very informative. That's the type of information that's helpful to us to understand what the staff is doing.
The last two items that we have, the committee tabled these to the full board for this full discussion. Both of these deal with the fictitious name issues we've discussed in the past. The first we have got an email from Mr. Crutchfield, who I believe is here today, that he did not wish to resubmit his application under a different name, and I think he's asked to address the board again today. And then the other one, we had a request from Jonathan Fault, who I believe he owns Fault CPAs or something like similar to that, and he's asking to change his firm name to Integrated CFO, all one word. So I'll open up for discussion on that, and I'll turn it back over to you, Bill, for you want to.
You run it.
Oh, I run it. Okay, you're chairman.
You're the chair of the committee.
It's turned. We tabled to the full board.
Okay.
No, I'm kidding.
No, that's fine.
I guess what the committee would like the board to discuss, and I know we made a comment earlier, I think Henry made the comment about, we're reviewing our policies, and it's one of those policies is the fictitious name issue that we're going to be reviewing. How do we want to handle this going forward? Because like I said, we've got two basically requests right now for a firm name that would, potentially fall under the fictitious name category because it doesn't include the practitioner's name in the firm name. Open for discussion on that.
Right. Observations from the full board?
Mr. Chairman, I would like for us as a board to do some research into what other governmental agencies, how they handle fictitious names. At the TSCPA meeting that I attended back in August with Mark, one of the board members came to me and told me that the SEC or within the financial planning community that there was some very strict regulations on the use of fictitious names. I would invite us to look at what other agencies are using, what policies they're following for adopting or allowing for fictitious names, to see what standards are out there for different groups.
And I think this is something that NASBA could presumably be able to provide some significant input on.
I'm not sure. I think over the many different jurisdictions that NASBA deals with, that there's a lot of different policies that various jurisdictions follow. Some are much more restrictive, some are not. So it would be good to look at what other states are doing. But I would also go outside of the accounting profession and look at what maybe the financial planning or some of the SEC regulated firms are using.
I think I would also like to see whatever direction that we become more specific in our law in terms of how we define this, because one of the problems is every time it comes to a different board, they're going to have a different opinion, and this is how we started down this path. So the danger, of course, is that as soon as we approve one name, we have basically established precedents that says we can't stop. And my issue is that I feel like it's unprofessional, and we are a professional organization. So I am pretty strong about not approving these fictitious names. It just opens, integrated CFO solutions. Does that mean that all CFOs are there? I mean, there's so many dangers here because we as a board are saying that we are approving this as if we're giving it some validation. And I think that walks into a very dangerous area.
Let me ask a question. I know that there's been some names that may fall under the fictitious name criteria in the past. I assume this is where the policy versus law issue comes up, and that if, in the past, if someone came in and had a name such as, I don't know an example of one, but a firm that, that we've approved called, something I'm going to use this one as an example, integrated CFO, and it say it had been approved. That would have been something that management would have looked at, evaluated, and decided that it's compliant with our rules and approved it, and it would never come to this board. So it's possible that a lot of these fictitious names that they would have never come through our review, right? Is that a fair statement?
It is a fair statement. In the policies that we've been discussing, it gives the executive director and the firm permit coordinator the authority to approve fictitious names.
I mean, generally, the only ones that have come before us have been ones that you have not approved, where they've requested that the board reconsider or consider overriding your opinion, I guess would.
When I started bringing them to you, it was because I had one or two that really were out there, and I really could not approve them. But now that I've seen how this board is reviewing fictitious names and the idea that perhaps the profession is going astray in branding some of these fictitious names, we've kind of abandoned our authority to approve these, and we're going to be bringing them to the board for your approval.
Whitaker, is there a citation to the Tennessee Code that deals with fictitious names, or is it just in our rules?
I'm pretty sure the fleshing out is just in the rule. The citation that's listed in the rule is 62.1.113I, but I don't really think there's a whole lot of detail there. It just says, no person or firm holding a license under this chapter shall use a firm, professional or firm name or designation that is misleading about the legal form of the firm, the persons who are partners, officers, members, managers, shareholders, or about any other matter, provided that one of the names may be included in the name of a firm or its successor. So that's, the statute is not of much help there. It's really comes down to what's in the rule now.
Have the rule citation for me real quick?
Sure. It's -03-.15 firms, and if you're in the book, the rule book, it's page 53.
So if I understand where we are, the board is asking management to assess, come back with more information regarding maybe how other states are handling fictitious names.
Recommendation to?
Yeah. Along with the recommendation for the board to consider.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say the committee and the board now still have the integrated CFO
Right, that's what I was-
and intra-count before them. Not suggesting how the board can or should vote, because that's you guys call. However, it's of note that the most recent round of fictitious names submitted for board approval, that for the first time, kind of as we're learning, have not gone the policy executive director approval route and have come to the board for review, have all been denied to date. And so if the board is concerned and potentially wishes to undertake some sort of rulemaking, rule change, or what have you, to clarify and firm up the fictitious names for firms rule, however the board wishes to do that, it probably needs to not be in the business of picking and choosing, and to, however it chooses to apply the rule, do it uniformly.
We have two items, two
Two items,
requests.
right.
And I'll take them in reverse order. The first one was a reconsideration request by Mr. Crutchfield, who's here, and if, I assume he wants to address the board, which I'll be glad to hear what he has to say, if that's okay with you, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
I guess I've said really, I feel like in the last board meeting, all that I needed to say on the matter, but one thing I would like to do is just remind everyone that the rule currently states that the name can't be misleading. So all of this is not really about, is the name fictitious or not? It's about, is the name misleading? There's nothing inherently misleading about a fictitious name, in my opinion. And again, in the last board meeting, while I did get an indication that the name Intracount PLLC was vague, because it doesn't say anything about the nature of the business, I had also suggested Intracount CPA services, Intracount accounting services, and to date I have not received a single explanation as to how that would mislead a member of the public. So if there was a rule or regulation, change such that fictitious names were unallowable, then I could accept that easily. I could understand that. But right now, the rule just says it can't be misleading. And so I can't understand why the names that I've been submitting have been denied. It seemed like that would need to take place after that rule was changed.
Mr. Crutchfield, thank you for coming back today, and forgive me, I wasn't here at the last meeting, so can I just ask, and maybe this was asked, I'm not sure, but I don't know what the word means. What does intra-account mean?
Intra-account doesn't really mean anything. That was part of the reason why it was confusing to me as to how it could mislead anyone. It was just a name that I chose, and I can't really understand how it could mislead.
If it doesn't mean anything, that's why it's misleading, in your own words. And that's what we have a problem with. Typically, our firm names have had the name of a member in them, and that's what we're trying to clarify so that we go forward with this. And it's not anything about this particular one. It's just we're getting a lot of them, and we need to know what that standard needs to be so that we're all on the same page and nobody has a disagreement. And that's the problem I had with it, and you just reiterated it means nothing.
Well,
so it's misleading.
But for fictitious names, some fictitious names do mean things. In the last board meeting, there were names, well, not in the last one, but in the one prior to that, there were other names like, was it church auditing and these other types of names. And so I don't think this is my first time hearing that the reason why it's misleading is because the name doesn't mean anything. But I would submit that to mislead an individual, you would have to give them a false impression. So if intracount doesn't mean anything, I don't understand how that would mislead someone, especially because the regulation seems to say that it has to be misleading regarding the nature of the business.
So to that point, I think it's an interesting point that you bring up. I would probably disagree with you on your assertion of what misleading means. It seems to me like under 0020-03-.15, section 1D says tends to mislead regarding the nature of the business or the affiliation of the trade name user with another business entity. And that first part of it, I guess my question is, I just don't know what it means. And if I'm in the public and I see the name, I guess I can't get to the point where it's not misleading because it's not clear. I mean, to me, the purpose is it clear to understand what the business is doing? And if it isn't clear, then that's where the problem, I believe, is.
I would submit that intracount CPA services would be clear regarding the nature of the business, that they perform CPA services, and intracount accounting services would be clear to a member of the public.
The point, I think, is, for me, I don't know the board, but my question would be the inter-account. I just don't know what that means. That would be, again, I just don't know what it means. That's the only question that I've got.
I can understand that.
And I agree with those observations. You said before, tell us again why you have elected not to use your own name.
Well, I've elected not to use my own name because I was trying to decide a name that I would like for the business, and I would prefer to use a different name than my own name. I mean, because what I did, I read the law, and the law said that the name couldn't be misleading. And so I didn't think that a name like that would be misleading. And then, of course, after my name was denied, I saw that there were plenty of other fictitious firm names. And so I couldn't understand how mine would be misleading. But there was no particular reason why I didn't want to use my own name, just that I preferred this name over that one.
We're bound by the decisions of prior boards. The question is right now of how to deal with fictitious names and your applications. So appreciate your appearance here. Do you have any other observations to share with the board?
No, I don't. I think that's it.
Oh, do we have a motion regarding this application?
Chairman, if I may, just briefly before the motion and vote, to the point of misleading, I mean, obviously misleading is not a defined term, but it may be worth the board's consideration to determine if misleading is, affirmatively saying something else like the church name or the CFO name or something else, the title leading to a specific other place as opposed to, well, okay, we don't know what this word means, but for example, on one of his proposed changes, intra-account CPA services, well, if you're confused about what intra-account is, you can go to the website or call the number or something, but CPA services or accounting services seems to at least tell the public what the nature of the business is in a way that intra-account by itself does not. Again, not suggesting how the board should vote. I just thought I'd throw that out there for consideration.
I think, again, unless I think we have to be very careful about allowing a name that's made up, because there's so many things that if we say that misleading is not a made-up name, then we're going to be covered up with made-up names. And I do think that we need to clarify better our law. But I also believe that an invented name is misleading. I don't know, it's close enough to be like internal accounting. I don't know, it just is misleading to me.
And I understand that, Dr. Spison. It's really just a matter of helping the board to flesh out its rationale and reasoning at whatever that decision is, so that it's clear for the record and for future boards, posterity, and maybe rulemaking, that what this board has thought, done, and said on the matter. That's all.
Have a motion.
I think one of the other issues we have is that we're like, as someone said earlier, we're reviewing actions of previous boards. We're also reviewing our policies and the rules and the laws. And I guess my concern would be, while we're in this review process, I would have a hard time accepting any firm name that would be potentially considered under the fictitious rules. I'm not an attorney on this, but is that an acceptable thing for us to do if we're in the review process, which we are, to put a hold on?
While we're deliberating how we're going to apply fictitious names, that we would defer action on any application that has a fictitious name.
I mean, it's an important distinction as to whether you're going to defer or deny, because to defer means put off action, but to deny means no. So, I mean, what the board has, and again, what the board has done in prior meetings this year as this issue bubbled to the surface was, with the exception so far of Mr. Crutchfield, to deny all of the fictitious names that came before it once this became a concern. And if the board's inclination is to move forward with the review that you mentioned and possibly undertaking rulemaking whenever that's possible, then I rest on my earlier statement. The board needs to be consistent in its application, whatever that is.
But we did deny all requests. Mr. Crutchfield just chose to come and appeal our denial.
Yes, he had requested to appear before the board, and although it's not clear under the fictitious firm rule what under subsection 3 says may disapprove of any fictitious name if it determines after notice in a hearing that the trade name is deceptive, just to make sure that Mr. Crutchfield had notice of the board's decision and an opportunity to be heard. He was invited to come and address the board to make sure there's no question the board had complied with that rule in this regard. But other than that, yes, all of the other 4, it was a batch of 5, and all of the other 4 were denied as well. Mr. Crutchfield, his was denied with that batch. He came back to discuss, so the status quo is still denial for the intra-account matter. And so if the board were going to do something different, it would have to vote to overturn that. If it were going to sustain its earlier decision, I would suggest a motion and a vote to that effect as well.
Have we received any new applications for any of the other names? I know it's been discussed, but have we gotten any formal applications?
Other than the integrated CFO?
I'm talking about from Mr. Crutchfield's firm.
Oh,
I think he had mentioned we could change it to inter-account CPA services or...
No, it was my understanding that Mr. Crutchfield wanted to come to this meeting to see if the board's was willing to reconsider its prior decision before figuring out what, if anything, to do about the business name, because any change to that is obviously going to come with some level of time, cost, and expense, and I think he just wanted to forego that until he heard back from the board. But if I'm wrong, Mr. Crutchfield can correct me, but...
Can I get some quick...
You have something else that you wanted to address? Okay.
Just quick clarity, Chris. So are we operating under only number 3 under the rule, or does 2 still apply as well?
Well, I would say that you can't separate them out. I think you have to go with number 2 and number 3 and read them both. I mentioned sub 3 out of an abundance of caution to make sure that especially with Mr. Crutchfield and also with Mr. Shepard and Church Audit, because they had retained counsel and made certain inquiries and requests of the board. So again, out of an abundance of caution, we gave them the opportunity as well to come and show up here and address the board, but they declined to do so. So,
and so right now, the only fictitious name application is just integrated inter-account, right?
It's intra-account PLLC. That's
Okay.
it. And then the integrated CFO that
Okay.
was also discussed. I'm not aware of any others.
No, there's nothing else out there.
Can I ask I don't want to get too far down this rabbit hole right now, but we're going to review this, and I guess this just popped in my head, and we're going to review the other issue we're going to review is do tax firms have to have licensed firms? And the name H&R Block came up. And maybe I just don't know my history on accounting firms, but is that a name? I assume HR is somebody.
Henry and Richard,
Is it Henry and Richard Block?
but they spelled their name B-L-O-C-H.
Appreciate that. It'd be a good trivia question. That's all I got to say.
So the question is whether we reaffirm or do we you're suggesting we either reaffirm the prior action of the board? Do we need to do that, or just let it stand?
Just if the denial's going to remain upheld, as long as that's clear for the record, I think it's fine for intra-count. Now, integrated CFO will require a motion, second, and
Right.
vote because it's a new matter.
Okay. Is there a motion to change the prior decision of this board regarding intra-account? Hearing no motion, we'll move on to the next item.
The next item we had was a request from Jonathan Fault for a name change, to change his firm to Integrated CFO. I think we've discussed this in a lot. I'll go ahead and make a motion based on our other discussions that we deny this request because it's we consider it to be a fictitious name, especially while we review our policies and laws.
Second to that motion?
Second.
Further discussion?
Well, I do have one question. Chris, can you tell us, is this an acceptable thing for us to do, to say we're just going to deny them all? I mean, because it looks like the rule talks about misleading or deceptive. I want to make sure we're doing it the right way.
Well, not to be too much of a lawyer here, but if you look at subsection 2 under that rule, it says what a fictitious name is, and then it says may not be used by a CPA firm unless such name has been registered with and approved by the board and it is not false or misleading. So based on the separation of those thoughts and a comma between the two, it seems like those are two separate factors. Is it advisable for the board to use a legal term, arbitrary and capricious in its denials? No, it's not. But it would seem like under sub 2, in order to use a fictitious name, you have to be not false or misleading and approved by the board. So if the board simply does not approve it, then it cannot proceed.
Thank you.
Motion and a second to deny this request. Other discussion?
Recommending I make a change to my motion.
No, I think your motion was good the way it was.
All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. You have one more item, but I guess the question is, at some point, we probably need to take a break.
Well, one item I've got left is regarding state-specific ethics and a presentation by TSCPA.
If it's okay with the board, we'll proceed with this so we can conclude the licensing committee agenda. Okay. Wendy?
Before Wendy comes,
Oh, okay.
if I could, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Eldridge, there was one more item, Mr. Hoffman. It's on your iPads. It's R. Scott Hoffman,
Well, that's the one we didn't have on our.
the one on your agenda. If you will review that before Ms. Garvin comes to the stand, I'd appreciate it.
Sorry, we had an additional agenda item as well, so do we want to do that first? Do you want to do?
The very last one.
I'm afraid we'll both forget it if we don't go ahead and do it.
Okay, this is a request by Mr. Scott Hoffman, who is licensed in, I believe, North Carolina and for 30 years, and is licensed in Florida for 20 years. He has 133 semester hours. I guess he passed the exam in, was it 83? Long time ago. And now the rules, I guess he's wanting to get licensed in Tennessee, and the rules require that you have 150 hours, or, and correct me if I misstate this, or is it 4 years of relevant industry experience?
Yes, 4 years of accounting experience.
Okay, Mr. Hoffman he last practiced public accounting in 1983. He's spent 33 years in the investment business, and he's licensed, like I said, as a CPA in North Carolina and Florida. He's also a CFA, a Chartered Financial Analyst, and he's got all of his several security licenses and insurance licenses. And he's asking the board that we consider his work experience as a investment consultant, investment advisor, to be relevant experience. And I believe as Gabe, was it you that pointed out in our rules that it does specify that an investment advisor and advisory and consulting services do provide adequate experience?
I believe it's financial advisory services is the word. It's in the code. If you give me just a second, I'll try to.
That's what you said, yeah.
It's 62-1-106F.
Right. So it says the experience shall include providing any type of service or advice involving the use of accounting, attest, management advisory, financial advisory, tax, or consulting skills, all of which were verified by the licensee.
So the board, the committee wanted to recommend to the board that we would accept this application for licensure in Tennessee based on the fact that this meets our rules and is adequate experience. There's no exception to be made here. It's just we're considering him to have adequate experience, and therefore we recommend licensure.
Second to the motion.
Second.
Further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Now, TSCPA.
Mr. Eldridge, would you like me to go through the presentation again? Do you want to summarize what the group talked about and where we left it yesterday, or how would you like me to?
I'll give a quick summary. We heard a request from TSCPA, and correct me if I'm wrong here. I'm going from memory, which is getting worse every day. See, I already forgot what I was going to say. For the TSCPA to become the sole provider of the state-specific ethics course, in their opinion, that it would provide better consistency, better presentation, more competitive better pricing for our members. One of the issues that came up is the state board our staff do provide live CPE for for various groups of, I believe it's 20 or more, and they assured us that this would still be allowed, that they would be able to use their materials to provide these presentations. That's kind of the brief summary. Did I leave anything of significance out?
I think one of the reasons we had come to this presentation or suggestion, I guess, to the board members was, one, because there are currently 17 programs approved with not any necessarily quality control over those programs. So they were approved at one point in time. However, there isn't really follow-up with those organizations to evaluate speakers, to evaluate the content, is it being presented effectively, etc. We have received feedback, not necessarily formally, but verbally from a variety of folks, including maybe some on this board, just the struggles with the content maybe being quality or engaging, or that the attendees were able to get something out of the course. And I think previously the board has talked about, well, should we do this ourselves? Should we bring it in-house? Should we make it available online? Would that be a better way to handle this? And what we are offering or presenting is the option to do that basically for you all, for the licensees. We have talked to the NASBA Center for Public Trust, who is developing content at the request of the Big Four to provide to state societies to assist in building better courses for licensees. In addition, TSCPA is prepared to look into various software, instructional design firms that specialize in building continuing education products, and then we marry that with our experts, Mark, Doug Warren, those who have taught the class before, and we build a product that's available 24/7 to members, while still allowing board staff to go out and have a visual presence to those larger groups. The way I understood that we left yesterday was there were some questions. I think Gabe had some questions over, any documented complaints about other programs. So I don't know that, I believe Mark said there had not been any received at the board level. Most of what we've heard has been verbal, but we can look into that.
We also were very interested, and I know you're going to address this about, I think the committee has interest in looking further into this, and I think what we had found out was Virginia, I think, had done a similar type of program, and that we would like to get information on how Virginia did it, but also how they got to, we want to review their rules and the program that they implemented, but also kind of behind the scenes as far as how they got from where we are right now to that sort of program. And I think that Mark was going to work to get that information for us at our next board meeting, if I remember correctly. Is that?
Mindy, you were going to play a role in helping.
And she was going to help as well.
Yes. I did review some of the minutes from the Virginia boards. I think they took 4 to 5 meetings to get through this. And one of their main concerns, which hasn't come up here, was just the society's ability to make that available for the number of licensees that they had, which would not be a concern for us. And the other was, does the board have legal authority? So that was tabled for a couple of meetings. The minutes simply indicate that legal counsel gave them authority to make that decision. Now, whether they had previous programs approved and had to rescind any approvals, it's not clear in the minutes. We'll have to reach out and or view those deliberations.
We were also any potential unfair competition issues and that sort of thing. Because basically this would be creating a monopoly on the Tennessee state-specific ethics market, I guess, so to speak. And I think that was something that we were also concerned about looking into.
Can I ask a question? I think you addressed this yesterday. I wasn't on the committee.
Okay.
I know the society, you were saying the society charges members versus non-members different prices for regular CPE, and the question was asked. I don't remember what your answer was.
Typically, in the CPE market, yes, a discount is given if the licensee is a member of the TSCPA. So in this situation, we are willing to talk about standard pricing across the board.
Yeah. Same. Yeah. And also, I know it would be available on the TSCPA's website. Would that be the only place where you could go online to get the programming? Is that?
I think because from a technology standpoint, we could link to it, but I think that you would eventually have to come through our site to get to it.
We could, and I don't know how the state works, but there could be something on the state for people that may not be a member
Certainly.
of your organization. They could still come through maybe the board's website that could then either tell them where to go or link
Certainly.
them, click
Link
there,
them.
and then link into your site.
Yes.
If they're not used to going directly to the society's
Certainly.
website.
And there is, for instance, since Virginia's farther along in this, they have a full web page that has a lot of Q&As on what do I do if this or that or the other. So there's a lot of good instruction there, and we could certainly develop the same thing to put on the board's website or further direct them to the TSCPA site.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I think the other thing we did discuss was there was a concern, I think, about controlling the pricing, and I think one idea was brought up is that on an annual basis, the TSCPA would present a budget to us, and then we as the board would review and approve the pricing for that year. That was another consideration. We didn't obviously make any decisions, but that was just something that did get brought up.
And that could be in addition with content as well. I mean, I think one of the struggles right now is there isn't a regular review of content, and if that's something the board would like, that could certainly be combined and reviewed by the board once a year, and that would, from a resource standpoint, looking at one course versus all 17 might be an efficient way to do it.
I will point out that the earlier the audit process for the exempt CPE providers that we discussed earlier that Mark's going to put a presentation together would include these as well as these vendors, as reviewing them on an annual basis as well.
I will point out that once the board has approved one of the state-specific ethics courses, that is the way it's supposed to be presented. If there are minor changes, we don't ask them to send it back in. But if there are major changes, then we do ask them to send it back in for board review. So, just minor changes, it should be basically the same course as what you initially approved to begin with.
But what I'm hearing the board say is that we're interested in and open to exploring the possibility of the TSCPA developing the course and coming back with the information, including particularly the Virginia experience, and it would be further deliberated and discussed at a future meeting.
Just to clarify, Wendy, because I was listening in yesterday, understand that you are still proceeding with developing the software, whether we make you the sole provider or not.
Right. We are looking into doing that regardless. We hear the feedback from those that are taking the course, and a lot of frustration out there that people aren't getting a lot out of it. So we are looking to make a better product.
I think the concern is maybe that we have to keep in mind we have approved 17 vendors. In fact, just recently have approved a couple of others, so how it would affect them and maybe their source of income in terms of whether we do some grandfathering or to suddenly tell them they're no longer approved to do this and only the TSCPA is approved. That's a concern.
That's all part of what we've got to deliberate and come up with.
That was our concern and why we wanted to see what Virginia had done.
Right.
'Cause I
What did they
assumed
do with other providers?
Yeah.
I believe that, yes, and I have that on my notes to provide. I believe at the end of the meeting yesterday that the committee voted on kind of a short-term ban on approving additional courses while we look into this.
That's correct.
Right.
Recommendation.
We're going to put a hold on any new applications. Well, we need to actually take that to the board. I didn't have my notes, but the committee recommended, made a motion to recommend to the board, I guess, legal counsel may help me out. Do we need a motion from the board to do that, or can the committee decide we're going to hold all applications for new state-specific ethics provider, CPE providers?
I think it would probably help for clarity purposes for the record for somebody trying to figure out, okay, well, if this is what the board is doing, when did it happen and when was it voted on at an open, publicly noticed meeting? So
Okay.
just, motion and a second to instruct the executive director to not approve any more of these kind of CPEs providers pending the board's review.
Committee would recommend such a motion.
What he just said.
What he just said. For state-specific ethics. Yeah.
Second?
But before that, do we want any kind of legal opinion to come back to the next meeting? Does the board feel comfortable that they have the authority? Should we answer all these questions, or should legal be working on anything at the same time that we're kind of gathering information?
I think legal should, because obviously the concern was whether we get into kind of any monopoly issues or that sort of thing, unfair competition or whatever the laws are. I would prefer that we have legal opinion as well.
Well, at least consultation with the board attorney.
Yeah, and just as a practical matter, I'd kind of prefer it to be a two-way process, especially since it's the TSCPA that is in some ways coming forward with this. If they have any thoughts or something that they know from before in other states, such that we don't have to entirely recreate the wheel if it comes to that, anything they can provide to us in our evaluation would be helpful.
I have a motion. Pardon me, go
A
ahead.
question. Did the committee yesterday put a time limit on that moratorium? Was there like a 6-month,
I just asked a question, and I'm just trying to figure out how long we think it would take to get back to the next board meeting. And I think we were saying 3 to 6 months potentially before we'd have something in the board meeting, we thought.
Like Virginia, five meetings or so. I don't know if they meet monthly or quarterly. Hopefully it's.
They meet more often than this board does. I think they meet closer to every 6 weeks.
We got a
or
year and a
so.
half based on that. Is that right? I think we had discussed July, was it July of 15, kind of the potential target date? I don't think, we did not specifically say it was any kind of
I think we were
timeline.
kind of looking at, if we could have something available by January of 2016 to offer everyone, or that might be the best timing.
I think it's a good idea to put a time limit on a moratorium, but that's just a personal, it kind of keeps the board moving along and it doesn't cut off people's.
And the time limit will be when we, I guess, make a decision on whether or not to pursue this one way or the other. Is there any issue with doing that?
Is it correct to assume that you'll come back like at the next meeting and give us a status report?
Yes.
So I think we can monitor whether it's moving forward in a fashion acceptable to the board. And if it isn't, then we could reverse the moratorium. But I agree, it shouldn't be indefinite. But I also think it's significant that the implementation date that you suggested was January 1st of 2016 or somewhere thereabouts, based upon in coordination with the state board or the staff. We have a motion and a second on the floor. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Let's take a break and reconvene at 11 o'clock, or try to. The Executive Committee met yesterday afternoon and discussed the items that were outlined on the agenda. The first one being fiscal 14 results and what the results for the first 2 months of fiscal 15. Mark, do you want to do a headline review?
Sure. On your iPads, this is under operating results, FY16 budget, because they're all kind of together. The second column for the FY14 actual, if you'll notice, our revenues are $1,160,330. The state has not officially closed out FY14 yet, so we've not received information on the state regulatory fee or our cost backs. So if you'll notice down there at the bottom, year-end cost backs, I put in $212,000, which is what we had budgeted. We'll get a detail on that sometime in the next week or so, and I'll send that to you as soon as we get it. But right now, we don't have anything to back that up.
But assuming you will come in some general range, probably up higher than that, but nonetheless, the excess of revenue over expenses will exceed $150,000.
I'd say we're going to exceed $100,000. Yes, sir. No surprises on salaries. Travel came in at $38,309, which is significantly less than what we had budgeted. But here again, I budget for board members to attend NASBA events, and we've had some participation, but not as much as we are allowed, and I'm budgeting for the full amount. Also, we had budgeted, what was the other thing? I want to say for the prop committee to meet, and they did not meet during FY14. So there's no expense there for their travel. I don't think there are any other surprises on here. I will note that state professional services seems to be down a little bit from FY13. I think FY13 is where they charged us for the move from the Andrew Johnson Tower to the David Crockett Tower, and that's why FY14 is significantly less.
What does professional services encompass? I presume there's a charge for Chris's time. Is that based upon time, or is that just a set allotment?
State professional services, that includes rent, that includes telephone, that includes the cars. Those are the big items.
So where's the charge for like legal support?
That comes in under the year-end cost backs.
For legal support, is that based upon time Chris spends, or is it just 60%?
I want to say last year they based it on the approximate time that he spends with our program as opposed to other programs. And we're charged his salary for the amount of time that he spends with us.
But other parts of the legal department that you're part of?
All those roll into the administrative cost backs, and that's the big number that we get.
Comments regarding the first 2 months, August of 15 and versus 14?
Let me point out, if you'll look there, August FY15, the revenues are significantly less than August of FY14. That's because we have not been actively pursuing our delinquent licensees. We have like 171 at this point, Karen, that are delinquent.
I think it was 162 this morning.
162 this morning. We've not had staffing in place to do that. That is something that we have now started doing. We sent out emails last month. We'll start making phone calls and hopefully get some of those delinquent licensees to renew. Last year, we ended up with less than 25 delinquent licensees at the end of the year. We're hoping that we can meet that number again. When we get less than 25, I take my staff out to dinner, and I owe them a dinner for last year that we haven't collected yet. But we do our best to get as many delinquent licensees back on board as we can. And that produces significant revenue because they're paying their renewal fee in addition to the late fee. So multiply that and you get a significant number. Other than that, it looks like everything's pretty much in line. I will point out that under the third-party professional administrative services, that $7,200 includes our annual fee to NASBA for membership. That's $6,600 of that. So that's why it's as high as it is.
I also would remind the board that NASBA, like the time and expenses that you incurred in conjunction with your NASBA responsibilities, would have been reimbursed by them, but under the Tennessee laws, we can't accept it because they are a provider.
Services, yes, sir, that's correct.
Services that the exam is provided from. That's the service that we're getting from them.
Under the conflict of interest, general counsel is being replaced. So as usual, when we get a new general counsel, I'll ask for a review of that conflict of interest policy to see if we can't receive NASBA funds because they do offer at least one scholarship for board members to attend all events, and hopefully we can get some refunding of money there. But
There really is not any alternative source for the exam or the services they provide, is there, at this point?
there are other providers out there, Casey. It's just that CPACE and Prometric are the best qualified, and they're the ones that we have selected to go with.
I would presume most states go through NASBA or Prometric.
Most states go through, everybody goes through Prometric because they have the hardware and the software, but not every state is what is called a CPACE state, in that some states still process their own applications for sitting for the exam and do their own processing. We no longer do that. CPACE does that for us.
we're required, the state has asked that the Board of Accountancy submit the fiscal 16 budget after our review today. Currently, the administration is asking for all state departments to have a plan on a 7% cut in the 16 budget. That does not apply to the regulatory boards, but that 7% cut is under the assumption that there will be no salary adjustments planned at this time for state employees. The Executive Committee reviewed this budget yesterday, and Mark had put in an adjustment for everybody of 3%, and we asked that that be changed to 2%. It's been several years since how long has it been since there's been any adjustment?
3 years. I believe we got 1.6.
1.6 2 years ago was
Yeah.
the last one.
But the percentage of salary increase is not performance related. It's
an across the board, everybody gets it.
right. But any further comments regarding the fiscal 16 budget?
I did plug in the number, Bill, to reduce the salary to 2%. If you'll look there on the FY16 budget, net revenue to reserves, what you have includes the 3%, and that shows that we're going to have a surplus of $3,322. With the change in the salary increase to 2%, that net revenue to reserves is $8,979. So it's about a $5,000 adjustment, taking it out of salaries, and that's additional money that will go to reserves.
The 16 budget, as you drafted it, is very consistent with that of the 15 budget. There are a couple of items that you might give some information on. You've got it in the narrative, but you might just review it quickly with us, like travel, employee training, and the like.
Have attachment B, which is the travel plan for FY16. It's very consistent with what we've done in the past. We are budgeting for board members to attend NASBA events. Here again, that has not always been the case. We're trying to, Ms. Spiceland's going to Washington, D.C., Henry's going to Washington, D.C., Bill Bloffus is going to Washington, D.C., so hopefully we'll have more attendance at NASBA events and we can use up this money. The travel has been decreased because in the past we have budgeted all of the NASBA events as part of travel. Well, when you go to a NASBA event, there's a $695 charge for you to attend that event. That has been in the travel budget. That is now being pulled out and put with the employee training, which is why you see the jump in employee training expenses, because $700 per person per NASBA event adds up to a significant amount. So we're bumping it up there in the employee training. Plus, remember, when you go to a NASBA event, you do get some CPE credit for it. So keep that in mind.
But in the total, that your travel, it costs in 16 will be less because you don't have the responsibility of being the executive or the chair of the executive directors committee.
Yes, sir, that is correct.
Question. Was there a fee decrease? What did revenue go down from 15 to 16 from the budget perspective?
Because there was, if you remember, there's a fee decrease for renewal from 120 to 110. That will not go into effect until renewals at 12/31/14.
One from so you had fiscal 14. It's declined every year since 14. Well, let's see, 14, 15, and 16 have all declined.
Revenues are going to go down a little bit. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And I believe that we have a few more renewals in odd-numbered years. I'm sorry, in even-numbered years than we do in odd-numbered years.
What do you assume, 100% renewal, or are you looking at 95% renewal? How do you figure that? Just curious.
The detail, Henry, is I'll look at 100% renewal because we have worked it down to where we only have like 25 that don't renew out of 7,500 that are renewing. That's a pretty good percentage. So we're looking at 99% plus that renew.
What is the percentage of people, new license applications versus people retiring licenses or expiring or going out?
We seem to be having a pretty consistent number of licensees that are out there. So the new licensees are pretty much taking up the ones that are retiring or closing or dying.
I guess I'm just looking at the nationwide CPA statistics, especially with the baby boomers situation. You've got a lot more practitioners at the approaching retirement age than you do a lot of people entering the practice. And is that something we, as a board, need to monitor to preserve our financial stability? If we've got, like I said, if we lose 40%, we're only picking up 20%. That could have a pretty significant impact on our budget.
You're correct. The national trend is for more accounting students leaving school and not taking the exam, or taking the exam and not seeking licensure. There is a decreasing number there, but in Tennessee we seem to be having a pretty consistent number that are applying that covers those that are retiring or dying. We've not seen a significant number in decrease of licensees.
I think that number is going to increase significantly as this baby boomer group gets closer to retirement.
I think it probably will.
I just want to point it out as something we may want to consider to keep an eye on.
Yeah.
What is the charge for to getting a CPA license for the first time? The certificate when you have passed the exam and met all the qualifications.
The application fee is $100 unless it's a reciprocal license, in which case it's $200.
Mark has provided supplemental information. There's a schedule in there of the compensation, base compensation of the 8 employees of the Tennessee State Board of Accountancy. Any other questions regarding the budget? I would entertain a motion to approve the budget subject to the alteration of moving the compensation from a 3% adjustment to 2%.
So moved. Second.
Further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Great, thank you. One of the things that Mark provides us at every meeting is the various meetings that he has attended. The fourth quarter, he was out and about considerably, which was a good deal of it was due to his responsibilities as the chair of the executive committee of the NASBA. I've asked him in the future he includes here the expenses, but to also include the days that he spends on these various commitments, so we have a better idea of how many days he's out of the office. And then there's information regarding the expenses incurred by the 2 investigators. Peer review transparency, Wendy.
I gave the committee just a brief update yesterday on peer review transparency, confidentiality, and I can do the same here. In August of this year, Mark and Henry attended the TSCPA Board of Directors meeting, gave a presentation on regulatory activities, and basically a concern from the board that there would be some interest in opening up those confidentiality requirements that are currently in place with regard to peer review results. The TSCPA board met later on in small groups. The consensus that came out of that meeting was that the TSCPA Board of Directors would like to continue to support the confidentiality provisions that are in place and continue to support the development of a PROC, if a peer review oversight committee by the board, if the board needed additional assurance about the quality of the program that the TSCPA administers.
Forwarded to the board the information regarding the peer review program that the TSCPA does and the review of it that's done every 2 years.
Right, and Mark has me on the agenda later to talk about that. Would you?
Okay.
Okay. So since the August meeting, the peer review committee met. We have an annual meeting, and we meet face to face. And this same topic was brought up in discussion in that group, and they felt like we should continue the conversation. And so we are going to have the chair or one of the members of the AICPA peer review board, who also sits on our peer review committee, will be attending the TSCPA board meeting in November to offer his thoughts, kind of the thoughts of what's going on in peer review currently, the AICPA's initiative on audit quality, kind of how we got where we are now, and see if that information makes any difference in their thoughts on the current confidentiality provisions. That's going to happen on November 6th. On November 7th, the TSCPA Council meets. We have invited Chairman Blofus and Mark to that meeting to sit on a panel along with myself and a couple of peer review folks to talk about any regulatory matters, but to bring this up for some open conversation between TSCPA Council and those members on the panel.
Questions of Wendy regarding those issues? Mobility?
Mobility, just quickly, we just wanted to bring some information to the committee and to the board on some recent feedback we had received from a number of firms in the state. So it appears that the Department of Labor sent a listing of firms who had completed employee benefit plan audits. They had forwarded a list of those firms out to state boards. Some state boards have been aggressive in making sure that every firm on the list was appropriately registered in their state. It's caused a lot of letters to go out to firms indicating that they weren't properly licensed. So, for instance, the Arizona board and the Texas board, I believe are the two that I recall, had sent letters to firms in our state basically saying you weren't properly licensed in our state but conducted an audit for an entity that's located here. In some situations, it sounds like none of the audit work was ever done there, or it was only delivered there. None of the work was actually done. So there was some confusion among the firms that they really needed to be licensed there. It's our understanding that they have, are rectifying that, but there is some confusion. And we would just like to encourage board members as they attend NASBA meetings or a meeting with other states to let people know that mobility is working here. It's worked for a number of states for a good amount of time, and this would help licensees be more efficient about their practice if other states would join the ranks for mobility.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to ask my fellow board members a question about confidentiality, how you feel about the issues of confidentiality. If you'll notice in your pads, the last item listed there, there's a memo in there dealing with peer review confidentiality. And it seems that Mark has made a couple of explanations to the TSCPA as to why we need to open up peer review information to the State Board of Accountancy. One dealing with mobility and the other one dealing with discipline procedures. And I'm particularly curious on your feelings about the issue of opening, if we were able to work out an agreement with the TSCPA over accessibility to peer review inspections, would we want to do that for a disciplinary purpose? I'm just curious on what other people, how other people feel about that.
Observations, comments?
Peer review program started initially to be remedial in nature. I think the program works. I think the things that are in place currently work. If someone fails their peer review, they either get it right or they get out of the program. If they get out of the program, they can no longer do bad work.
We hear about that, and then we get
That's right.
notified.
Yeah, so I'm not sure what we accomplished by going in and opening up files for the purpose of trying to penalize people.
I think it also, keeping it like it is, allows the firm performing the peer review to be a lot more realistic. I mean, the focus is that we identify firms that have problems and we make them, make them better, as opposed to, because all of a sudden it's going to be publicized everywhere. I think it may potentially, I mean, I'm not saying it would, but it potentially could impact that person's, opinion on those reports. I mean, I just think as Vic said, I think the program works, and if it's working, I don't know that changing it would be a positive thing to do. Because at the end of the day, if there's a substandard firm that's not meeting all the requirements, and then they're kicked out of the peer review program, while they can't tell us, and I think this is what I understand, they can't tell us why they were kicked out of the program, then they're notified of us, and then they have to come before, then we will question them, and then we have the right to ask them, why were you kicked out of the program? And at that point, we're going to find out about it. So, I mean, it's just, do we want to take on the bureaucracy of having to go and review every single one of these reports? Because I assume if the information's available, then we're obligated to go and review every single peer review as part of our licensing process or renewal process, I'm assuming. I mean, what does it say now? Are you a member of the peer review? What's it say on there?
Currently, right now, all I'd ask is, if you are performing a test services, are you enrolled in the peer review program?
If they've been kicked out, they would say no.
They would say no.
And then at that point, then we would investigate.
Well, when they're kicked out, Wendy's going to send us a notification that they've been removed from the program, and we'll start making inquiries then.
Okay.
Going back to what Vic said, that's a very good point. But what's getting ready to take place in the peer review program, as I understand it, is that whole process is evolving and it's changing, and it's going to take a little bit different focus here in the future. Am I correct on that?
That's true. It starts with the AICPA's Enhancing Audit Quality Initiative and some short-term changes to the peer review program. And then a long-term is really changing the program to be more on target, to catch deficiencies sooner. If you're taking on new engagements in high-risk industries, those are looked at now, not 2 years from now. Really enhancing the qualifications of a peer reviewer, making sure that if they're reviewing high-risk industries, that they're taking competency tests, that they are enrolled in the audit quality centers, that they sign a contract each year. So there's some additional, those haven't all been fleshed out yet, but yes, things are changing in the program to meet the needs of the environment that we're in now.
Henry, you were at the meeting. What's your opinion on this? Didn't you attend the meeting with TSCPA?
Well, it seems like that from our practitioner standpoint, that there's a great deal of fear on the part of the discipline issue, And it seemed like we ought to just take that out of the discussion and talk about mobility and talk about maybe giving us an opportunity to have oversight of that program, make the information available to us so that we could conduct the proper level of oversight as the State Board of Accountancy. I think as time goes on, as we learn more about what's taking place, then we may want to put this issue of discipline back on the table if the system's not taking care of itself. But like Vic says, so far it's been doing very good, and I would like to see it continue in that way. And I think we can have a better discussion with the TSCPA about this issue if we just take the issue of discipline off the table. No more discipline than what we've already been doing.
I don't understand all that. So you're in that scenario, then we would change the program so we could see the results of the peer review.
Right.
But we couldn't discipline, if we know a firm's got a substandard peer review, we could not discipline them?
At this point, these firms are being referred to us, and we're able to take action on them once we learn that they can no longer that they fail their peer review. But it takes 9 or 10 years for this process to take place. It takes quite a long time.
For someone who's complying with respect to having a peer review and they begin to fail their peer reviews, yes, it could take up to that long because you would have to have successive bad peer review reports and then go to a hearing to be kicked out of the program for basically non-compliance, which would be failing to get a pass report on a peer review. But that is, you have to have 2 successive, and then you're warned, and then that third one has to be a pass, or you will be submitted for a hearing.
Realistically, the only information that's being kept from us, in theory, would be firms that have problems that don't go through the remediation process successfully.
So, right, the ones that are being referred to you are those folks that we have
Failed out of the program, basically.
Right. They didn't complete the corrective action we asked them to complete. They didn't schedule and have a peer review. Somewhere along the line, they didn't cooperate with the program. Then we drop them and notified. And if the state board, if you all send them a letter and say, what's going on, and they say, I'm out of the business, I'm not doing it anymore, that may be one reason. Or, well, I didn't do my follow-up action. Well, then they've got to come back to me and say, I want back in. And I'll say, well, you can get back in if you do A, B, and C, which would typically mean get a pre-issuance review, whatever. If there was, whatever the reason they were kicked out for, they have to basically fix that before they can get back in.
My observations are that any accounting firm that audits public companies is subject to the reviews of the PCAOB. There are public portions of it and there are private portions of it. The private portions only become public if corrective action has not been taken in a timely fashion.
It's an interesting way to look at it. I think I was not aware of that.
And, you can read about the major firms that have been publicly disclosed that they failed PCAOB reviews, but it's for years ago because they didn't take corrective action, sufficient corrective action that satisfied the PCAOB. But I think it's improved the audit of public companies without a question. It certainly has not prevented audit failures. So,
And I would offer that this board has not taken one action as a result of PCAOB inspections, which is the question at hand, right?
but in the public part of the PCAOB report, the clients aren't identified.
But I'm just saying, I mean, you've got this public domain out there, and this board has taken no action on that, so I don't understand why we're even discussing looking at peer reviews and potentially taking action on those. It just, to me, I mean, you're consistent with both or don't do either.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, just something that was discussed in committee yesterday, just for the full board's benefit. However the board feels about this and ultimately decides to proceed, the board needs to be mindful of confidentiality of any documents vis-a-vis the Open Records Act. As it stands right now, the TSCPA is not a government entity and therefore not subject to the Open Records Act. The peer review oversight committee we have right now has specific record confidentiality provisions. Generally speaking, any document produced by or that comes into a government agency is presumed public record unless it is exempted by statute, regulation, or some sort of judicially recognized privilege. So if the board undertakes itself to become part of this process, then it could not, I believe, grant itself confidentiality by rule. It would probably require an amendment to the Accountancy Act itself to exclude peer review records that came into the hands of the actual board itself from public review. So that's just something to keep in mind as this process goes forward.
It's a question in somewhat a related fashion, but when complaints have been filed, and we're going to review those in a minute, those are confidential. Nobody can come in and ask for that until the board has ruled on them.
I don't think that's accurate. Fortunately, it doesn't happen much. I've been board counsel for going on 5 years now, and I think I've seen it maybe once or twice where somebody has asked for complaint documents, but in those very small number of cases, they were folks who were in the universe of the know about what was going on with the complaint. The overwhelming majority of complaints, nobody is really interested, frankly, in what's going on with them if they know they exist at all, because they have no stake in the matter, really. But in theory, a properly worded and sufficiently specific open records request for all complaint documents related to, such and such respondent or complaint, if they're not somehow privileged, we'd have to turn them over.
How does the board fulfill its obligation to evaluate peer review without looking at peer review documents? How do we do that?
I think that's what we're going to get into later in the agenda. The board has the authority in, I think, law and rule for the development of a peer review oversight committee.
Other discussion on this matter? Wendy, thank you. Item on the we discussed yesterday was communications by Mark with the board on an interim basis. Mark prepares a monthly report that he submits to the assistant commissioner that gives a good deal of information regarding activities of the staff during the prior month, and I've asked that he share that information with the board as he submits it to the assistant commissioner, and for your information, so that particularly since we only meet 4 times a year, it's a way to help us understand what's going on here on an interim basis. And I think Mark's going to add some further information to those reports. I don't know, any reaction to the one report that you've received? Very good. In the material that was provided, there is a description of the activities of the various members, the 5 members of the staff, for your information. One thing that the committee will do and solicit input from the whole board. It's been a couple of years since there's been a board review of the executive director's performance, and we would coordinate that with the assistant commissioner's office. I think that there is a standard evaluation of all executive directors of all the regulatory boards.
Yes, sir, there is.
So we would piggyback or utilize that information in that process. So I think that completes all the issues that we discussed yesterday. Oh, yes, I think that completes all of them. So we go to the Enforcement Committee. Casey?
Okay, first thing we want to do is look at the status of open complaints. That's the title of the document in your library there. It's like the 8th document from the bottom of the list. And when you open that up, you'll notice that the total of all cases that are open at as of October 16th is 97, and that is a significant increase from the July 24th meeting. And Don Mills made some very insightful comments to the committee yesterday. And I'm going to ask Don if you would just share those with the whole board very quickly as to why that increase.
I'll be glad to try. Basically, in a nutshell, as I stated yesterday, this is the first attempt of the investigators to go from reactive status to proactive status. What Ray and I did is we obtained a listing from the Internal Revenue Service of the PTIN numbers issued to people in the state of Tennessee, living in the state of Tennessee. We then filtered and took out everyone that was NA. We got down to CPAs practicing in the state of Tennessee. We basically, after taking out all the licensees that we knew that were valid, were left with 3 categories. The first one being people who were holding out as CPAs to the IRS that did in fact not have a license in the state of Tennessee or any other state. Our second category were those people living in Tennessee holding out as a certified public accountant who had valid license but in another state and therefore were not practicing appropriately in Tennessee. And of course the third category was licensed CPAs in the state of Tennessee who did not have an affiliation with a licensed firm or have a firm permit on their own. And so that's kind of where we went with this. Our influx of new complaints is based on our very first run through with this. I think Ray will agree with me. We have many more to go. You'll see reflected in the legal report. We did knock out some, and I don't want to say easy, but we knocked out several this past month for dismissal. We established that they were not in a state of non-compliance with what we were looking at and started out.
Okay, thank you, Don. Is any questions on Don's comments or the, I guess, report? Hey, let's open up the legal report, and it's not quite halfway down on your list of documents there, but one big improvement in this report this time is the cases or complaints have been grouped really according to the recommended action and should help us move through these more quickly. You'll see there the first caption on the first page is recommended dismissals, and I believe there are 17 cases under that category. The Enforcement Committee reviewed all of those cases yesterday and discussed them. There is one additional case that is number 22, which is under the caption of recommended letters of warning, and I believe there was some late developments on that case. Don Mills informed us in the committee meeting yesterday that he wanted to move the recommendation there to dismissal rather than letter of warning, and Mr. Whitaker agreed with that, so we will include number 22 with the group recommended for dismissal. Just some observations on this group. That makes a total of 18 complaints. 9 of those are the TPIN numbers that Mr. Mills just talked about. The other 9 are various and sundry other items. I believe everyone has been furnished a written copy of this report prior to the meeting, so I guess I would just ask, are there any observations or comments from the board or anyone here? Okay, not hearing any comments or questions, I would like to move on behalf of the Enforcement Committee. I guess there is one other comment here. Case number 9, I believe Gay Moon needs to recuse herself from that case.
Respectfully request to be recused from any decision-making.
So I think we can still go ahead and vote on all of these, which is numbers 1 through 17 and 22, to approve the action as written, understanding that Gabe Moon is recused from case number 9. So on behalf of the Enforcement Committee, I would like to make that motion.
Second?
I'll second it.
Okay. Further discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And let the record show that Gay has recused herself from the one as noted by Casey. Okay.
Thank you. The next category is recommended placement into litigation monitoring, and there are that includes numbers 18 and 19, and it's actually complaints involving 2 individuals that were in the same firm, and the committee discussed whether we're even have jurisdiction here or whatever, but after discussion with legal counsel, it's recommended that both complaints just be placed into litigation monitoring so we can stay informed as to what's going on there. So on behalf of the Enforcement Committee, I would make a motion that we adopt the recommendation of council as written there.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Okay, the next category is recommended cease and desist letters, and that includes numbers, I guess there are 2 complaints there, 20 and 21, and again, you've had an opportunity to review the written report. Would you like to take a couple of minutes to review these again, or? Okay, I would like to, again, move on behalf of the Enforcement Committee that we approve the actions as recommended and written in the report.
Second.
All those, any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
No? Motion passes.
Next category is recommended letters of warning. Basically close the complaints, but issue recommended letters of warning. Again, number 22, we voted on with the dismissal, so we will take that out of this category, but that leaves us with complaints number 23 through 25. And again, we reviewed these in detail in the committee yesterday. Hopefully you had a chance to review the written report to determine whether you have any questions or comments on any of these. So again, on behalf of the committee, I would like to make a motion that we approve the recommendation of legal counsel as to the disposition of these complaints.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Okay, the complaints 26 through 28 are, to me, a little more complicated and a little more at stake there. And case number 27, I need to recuse myself from that case, and I believe, Henry, you need to do likewise. I would like to take these one at a time and maybe just start with case number 26 and ask Mr. Whitaker to basically give us an overview and talk about the recommendation and then vote on that case by itself.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart. Item number 26 is pretty straightforward. Complaint alleges a respondent was operating a CPA firm. He is located pretty close to the Mississippi-Tennessee line. And according to his website, he has an office in Mississippi and one in Memphis. And the firm permit for this respondent has been expired since 2004. The respondent did speak with the investigator about this matter and advised in a sworn affidavit that if he elected to continue with his practice such as it is or is not in Tennessee, that he would get his firm permit situation rectified. And however, this is the respondent's second time before the board on the same offense. The only reason he had gotten a firm permit in the first place was due to a complaint, and that complaint was settled with a $450 civil penalty and a requirement to obtain a firm permit. Looks like that permit was in good standing for exactly the 1 year that it was originally obtained and has been expired since. So it's management and council's recommendation that a stiffer civil penalty is in order, and we recommend $1,000 civil penalty and a consent order, which includes a requirement for the respondent to, within 30 days of signing the consent order, either reinstate his firm permit to good standing or to close it.
Again, on behalf of the Enforcement Committee, I'd like to move that we approve the recommendation as written. So that's a motion, Mr. Chair.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor of the motion says.
I've got one question.
Sure.
Do we not put, I mean, if this is a second repeat offense, I mean, do we not put any CPE requirements for maybe some additional ethics requirements for, since the guy continues to ignore the rules? I'm just throwing it out there. Is that not something it's required in there?
It's not required, but if the board would like to add that as a requirement, historically, for folks who seem to have difficulty with license and renewal issues, typically a 2-hour state-specific ethics CPE as penalty, not counting towards the 80-hour 2-year requirement, it has been standard. But if the board wants to go there or another direction, that's the board's prerogative.
I'll yield to the committee. It just jumped out at me as a thought.
I think it's a good point that ought to be considered going forward. Do you want to amend the motion, Stephen?
I don't.
No, I was asking Stephen.
No, I'm just asking. Like I said, I'll
Okay.
trust the committee's judgment on that.
Further discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Okay, complaint number 27, enumerated 27, I need to recuse myself, and Henry Haas is doing the same thing. I guess, Mr. Whitaker, you can present that, and I'll be silent from this point.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart. This complaint alleges that a Tennessee licensed CPA who had a license which expired in 2005 and was reinstated in 2012, was convicted of felony embezzlement of approximately $292,000 from her employer in another state. And the reason her license expired in 2005 was because she went to jail and was unable to renew it. This particular respondent served 4.5 years in jail, was released, and in 2012 applied for her Tennessee CPA license to be reinstated. And the question on the reinstatement form asks if the applicant has been convicted of a felony in the last 5 years. The technically truthful answer to that was yes, because this person's conviction, I believe, was in 2005, and the appeals were denied in 06. So as of 2012, the reinstatement, that 5 years had passed. However, at the time the respondent was convicted of this offense, her license was still active, and therefore she had an ongoing obligation and responsibility to report to this board her felony conviction and failed to do so. Additionally, the felony conviction itself is a separate act that is grounds for discipline under the law and rules. There is some verbiage in there that the respondent requested, which I will not repeat for the board, because you guys have read that. However, based on the seriousness of the offense and the original failure to disclose a felony conviction and all the other factors, it doesn't seem like there's any appropriate penalty except license revocation in this matter for the maximum 5 years. And so the recommendation is for a consent order for voluntary revocation of this respondent's Tennessee CPA license, and that would save the cost, time, and expense of a formal hearing. And also, if this respondent signs a consent order, we're recommending no civil penalty because it does not appear the respondent has the ability to pay that. And the economics of the imposition of civil penalties must be considered as part of the calculus. So the primary goal being to impose discipline for the felony conviction and failure to disclose. I think that's rectified by the 5-year revocation, and that consent order, if approved, would also impose a requirement that that this particular respondent, should she petition for reinstatement in 2019 or thereafter, would have to appear in person before the board. Therefore, it wouldn't be a matter of paperwork slides through or technically truthful but not all the way answers. Would be able to get by with a reinstatement. So that's the recommendation of council and Mr. Mills.
Want to make a motion other than Casey, since he's recused himself?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to the board to accept council's recommendation on item number 28 in the report. I'm sorry, 27. Turn the page.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Okay, that leaves complaint enumerated 28, and again, I'll ask Mr. Whitaker to make some comments on that, and then I'll make a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart. This particular complaint alleges that the respondent, who is also a North Carolina licensee, had his North Carolina license revoked for failure to comply with the CPE audit, and that this respondent failed to disclose that revocation to the Tennessee board. Speaking with the staff attorney for the North Carolina board, he indicated to me that that is the board's standard, the North Carolina board's standard imposition of discipline for first-time offenders who fail CPE audits in that way. And so that revocation took place early in 2013. This respondent has now taken the steps necessary to get his North Carolina license back in order, and so there's no issue there. Which leaves us with the issue of this complaint and the respondent's failure to disclose the revocation, which is a separate ground for discipline from the revocation itself. Originally, this matter was scheduled for a formal hearing at the July meeting, and then the respondent retained counsel, and by agreement of counsel, based on scheduling conflict of opposing counsel, it was continued to today's meeting. And then over in the space of time between last meeting and this one, opposing counsel and myself engaged in some settlement discussions, and we came to what we think is a reasonable tentative settlement agreement subject to board approval. The board's original recommendation here was a $1,000 civil penalty with a 2-year license revocation. However, in discussions with respondent's counsel, it was communicated to me that the respondent, who works at a quite prestigious firm in California at this time, has been advised by his employer that they might have been willing to overlook one state license revocation, but probably not another. So the practical outcome, were the board to uphold its original revocation recommendation, would probably be this person gets fired from their job. It seems to me and also to the respondent's counsel, obviously, that is a little steep for blowing a CPE audit. Considering this individual has already had a revocation in North Carolina, has paid them $1,000 and had to get reinstated there, and then they'll have to do whatever penalties this board imposes. My response to respondent's counsel was, okay, well, you got to give to get. So what we came up with is to convert that 2-year revocation to probation and to increase the civil penalty. The civil penalty, based on agreement, if approved, would be $1,500, and then $200 to reimburse the board for the cost incurred in filing the notice of hearing and charges, which would result in a total $1,700 civil penalty and 2 years of license probation for this respondent. And in light of all the circumstances, I think it's reasonable and would recommend it for the board's approval. And I'll take any questions.
So if I'm hearing correctly, he did not have his CPE, he wasn't compliant with the CPE, and they revoked his license. There was no chance to remediate the problem before revoking the license?
No.
There's no defiance and...
Well, it wasn't, it didn't seem to be an overt act of defiance or anything. In fact, North Carolina deals with CPE audits a little more stringently than other jurisdictions, including our own. They actually prosecute failed CPE audits under their deceptive conduct rule. So I think that's why they went revocation there, but that's their prerogative.
There's no remediation process prior to the revoking of the license? Like with us, we will have a remediation opportunity. They just terminate the license and then...
Well, actually, it's both, if you want to get that license back. But if your question is there an opportunity for that licensee to prevent a complaint and discipline based on the blown CPE audit, the answer there is no. And so whatever happens discipline-wise happens, and then that individual, if they want their license back, has to do what they have to do, and that includes the remediation. So if they were 30, 40 hours short, something like that, then they have to include that as part of what they do to get back in good standing.
To license back. I mean, the license has been revoked.
It's revoked. It's not suspended. It's not on probation. It's done.
Okay, are there any other questions on this case or complaint? On behalf of the Enforcement Committee, I'd like to move that we approve council's recommendation as written in the report.
Second.
Further discussion?
For number 28.
All those in favor of the recommendation, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Mr. Whitaker, you have any further comments or anything regarding legal report or?
No, sir, just wanted to express for the record for the full board's hearing my appreciation to Mr. Blofus for his well-taken suggestion to divide these up by category of recommended disposition. It helped me stay organized, and I think it also expedited the committee and the full board's work on complaints, so I appreciate it.
I'd like to move we strike that from the record. We're giving Mr. Blofus too much credit.
I agree.
Mr. Chairman, that concludes the report of the Enforcement Committee.
Very good. Next item is legislative review. You have a detailed discussion of management's response, or a draft of what management is proposed to respond to the apprenticeship program. Chris, you want to discuss it beyond what we've already been provided?
Sure. It's kind of, this is what we anticipate the end product, or pretty close to it, being we'd made some reference to this public chapter at prior meetings and let the board know that we would be coming to you with what we come up with. The legislature, in its most recent session, passed Public Chapter 881, excuse me, and that requires all regulatory boards under the Division of Department of Commerce and Insurance to go through and answer a series of questions and provide a report regarding the feasibility and advisability of an apprenticeship program for each respective regulatory agency. And so this is the Board of Accountancy's response to that. Mark and I were a little, I guess, caught in the middle in terms of time-wise, because our draft of this was due to the Deputy Commissioner about October the 2nd. So, board didn't have a chance to look at it before then, but we feel like this is a pretty solid response, and we'll get them the information they need. The short version of the document you have in front of you is our response, and on behalf of the board, and the information provided in this, what will become part of the Division of Reg Boards report for the Accountancy Board, is that the Accountancy Board's 1-year experience requirement as part of the licensure requirement essentially serves as an apprenticeship program already. And so therefore it's, not very likely, or, we leave feasibility and the wisdom or not of such things to the legislature because they write the laws, but we would not recommend at this time any additional apprenticeship programs. Because the purpose behind PC 881 was to see if there's a possibility for certain programs to substitute real-world job experience in lieu of educational experience, while not sacrificing any quality or any quality of service upon licensure, and still allowing for the protection of the health, safety, and welfare of the public. There are other programs such as a barber board, which have been a little more high profile in that regard, but so with accountancy, what we've said is, okay, here's the information about our number of licensees, how many have gotten licensed, and then also we think the 1-year work experience requirement is sufficient, and not it's not necessary to impose additional pre-licensure requirements of up-and-coming CPAs. So with that summary, Mr. Crocker and I'd be happy to take any questions you might have. And at the end, it's unclear in the text of the statute whether boards are specifically explicitly required to approve this, but out of an abundance of caution, we would request a motion and a second and a vote to approve this in whatever the final format it becomes, subject to, we hope, minimal revisions by division management.
But it's already been submitted.
We have submitted this document that you have before you to Deputy Commissioner Giannini. As of my knowledge this morning, we have not received a response from him saying this is good, bad, terrible, or anything at all. So
We were required to submit a draft response, and this is what we submitted.
Anybody like to make a motion to endorse this response?
So moved.
I presume one of those is the second. So, further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We have no old business to cover.
Mr. Chairman, actually, there is one item of old business that we do need to talk about. At the last meeting, the board approved a refund to Ms. Judy Altum for late fees that she incurred in renewing her license because she'd been ill during the renewal period. This went to the assistant commissioner and the deputy commissioner. They referred it to legal, and legal has advised us that the board does not have the authority to waive any late fees. So I can inform Ms. Altum that she must pay the late fee and there's no waiver in effect, or the board can vote to go ahead and refund her late fee, and if that's the case, then should some litigation come up later on, I've been advised that you would not have representation from the state.
How much are we talking? How much are we talking about?
$100.
Just to kind of historically remind and refresh kind of how this came to be, Ms. Alton was requesting the late fee waiver, and I think what the board determined in granting that waiver was that her hospital discharge date was the operative date, because there's a 31-day grace period for late license renewal before late fee kicks in, and she was in fact discharged from the hospital in that 31 days. And so probably stretching it a fair amount to say that that is the actual date in question, but really and truly, we didn't get correspondence from her until several months later, and then the reinstatement of her license occurred well after the 31-day period. So unless the board wishes to yoga pretzel its way into that by saying that her discharge date is the operative date, probably going to have to go with what Mr. Crocker said.
I would make a motion based on legal counsel's response that we would deny refunding this request due to its our lack of authority to do so.
We will include a sufficient explanation in that letter saying, you know, our apologies.
We tried, but we got shot down. I'm kidding.
We'll phrase it just like that, Stephen.
Yeah, that's why I just like that.
Upon review of this matter by legal counsel, we are unfortunately unable to whatever.
Second of the motion. Discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. Okay.
You're opposed?
Opposed. Yep. Record Mr. Haas as a no. New business to review. Wendy again.
That's our first non-unanimous vote.
I know everyone's hungry, so I will attempt to get through this quickly. So I know the board over a good period of time has wrestled with the authority given to them to develop a peer review oversight committee. So Chairman Bluffus and I have talked, and he asked that I come and just give the board some information on what type of oversight the program already undergoes at the TSCPA. So this is going to focus just on the oversight for the most part. So if there are questions or if something doesn't make sense because there's part of the program you don't understand, feel free to ask me, but I'm not going to cover all of that simply because there's not time to do that. But if it would help in clarification, I can certainly do that. So I think the item on your iPad that I would like you to refer to is the TSCPA Annual Oversight Report 2013. And I think this document really is just going to lead me through everything I wanted to bring to your attention. So just to give you a little background, this report we are required to produce annually and make public on our website. So this is something that's done internally. I prepare it and the committee reviews and approves it. And then we must submit this to the AICPA, make it public on our website. So I'm going to walk through a little bit about the purpose of the report and what's in here. The idea is that this report gives an overview of the prior year's statistics on the program, as well as just the current operation of the program. We generally will present 3 years, a rolling 3-year cycle of statistics in this report, and we'll get to more of that in just a minute. There's a little bit of an overview of the program in general for anybody who doesn't know a lot about how the program started and where we are now. On page 2, it basically defines the difference between a system peer review and an engagement peer review, and I will quickly go over that because it might make a difference in how you understand the rest of the statistics. So a system peer review is a peer review that is for firms that do audit work primarily, and the reviewer is required to opine on the full system of quality control in that firm. And I'm being very brief about these. So an engagement review is for firms that their highest level of service is a review engagement, so there's no audit work performed. And that review is primarily engagement focused. There's no opining on the system of quality control in that firm. So those are the 2 types of peer reviews. So now we're going to move into the types of oversight that occur. The bottom of page 2 talks about oversight of peer reviews and reviewers. Now, this is oversight that we are required to do to meet the requirements of the program that the AICPA requires the TSCPA to do. So I pull 6, 8, 10 reviews a year. We have to do at least 2% of the reviews that are performed that year. We perform we'll do desk oversights on some of those reviews. We'll do on-site oversight where we'll send a committee member out while that peer review is occurring. One's actually happening today, in which we oversight the reviewer during that process. And the goal is simply to make sure that the reviewer is performing that review in accordance with standards. Those oversight reviewers do provide reports that come back to the committee and are approved by the committee at a later date. All of that is documented and sent on to the AICPA. During this process, when we decide what firms we're going to oversight, there's a plethora of reasons why we might choose a certain firm or a reviewer for that matter. So it may be that the firm does a lot of high-risk industry engagements. It may be that the reviewer is issuing a bunch of past reports, and we're concerned that there may be some problems behind that. So I'm going to move down. So that's one type of oversight that we perform. We pick reviewers and reviews each year. Okay? Yes.
You encompass the failed report people in the past in your selection? If you've got some problem reviewers, is that a point you might put one of your reviewers on that team as well?
Yes, and typically they're not on the team. What they do is they go and oversee or oversight the process. So they actually do not assist at all, and they don't bounce off ideas on each other really. So, okay, so the next type of oversight that's performed is an administrative oversight, which is on page 3, and simply that is basically where every other year, the committee chair comes to the office and spends a day with me going through files and following a checklist. It's an internal monitoring to make sure that we're doing everything in accordance with the standards of administering the program. That chair provides a report to the committee each year, and that's also, again, provided to the AICPA, that we are doing an internal monitoring. The last item that starts on page 3 is verification of reviewers' resumes. So every active reviewer, which would be somebody who has a resume on file that's been updated in the past 3 years or has performed in any capacity a peer review in the past 3 years, is eligible for oversight. And we oversight 1/3 of all reviewers each year. So each reviewer will be oversighted once in a 3-year period. What we require from them is for them to verify every industry. Each peer reviewer has to have a resume where they indicate the industries that they have experience in. So it may be nonprofit, HUD, governmental, ERISA. There's a variety of industries. So we require them to give us specific information their experience in each of those industries. We also make sure that they've taken the appropriate CPE required of peer reviewers by the AICPA. We make sure that they've received pass report on their most recent peer review, which is typically not something we have to worry about, and that there is continuing education for peer reviewers outside of just your general A&A, so we check that. We check their CPE requirements. Have they met the state requirements? Have they met the GAO requirements, etc.? So there's a lot of verification on reviewers specifically each 3 years to make sure they've maintained the proper qualifications to be a peer reviewer. We report those names to the AICPA at the end of each year, and we have to keep documentation on the results of our study on each reviewer. And I guess the last thing, that type of oversight that's done, is the AICPA Peer Review Board. In the opposite year that we do our own internal monitoring of our program, that the Peer Review Board sends somebody to the office for 2 days to spend a day with me and the administrative process, and then they spend a day with the committee and the report acceptance bodies to make sure their deliberations are according to standard, they're coming to the right decision, the technical reviewers are doing their job, and that peer review board member issues a report that is then accepted by the peer review board and made public on the AICPA website. The remainder of this particular report, starting on page 5, gives you statistics within the program for the year 2012. Is that right? Let's see. Yes, the calendar year 2012. So I am still in the process of preparing for the calendar year of 2013. That's generally prepared this time of year, sometime between now and December for the previous calendar year. The reason we wait a while is because the reviews, typically we need to have most of them accepted so that we can report on the statistics. And sometimes that process takes a while to get through the acceptance process. So I'd be happy to walk through the details of these statistics, but in a matter of time, if you can let me know, do you want to go further with some of the statistics, or? Okay. Page 5, Exhibit A, is enrollment statistics for the program. So we have the folks categorized by the size and number of professionals in their firm. Keep in mind that the folks that we administer at the TSCPA are those who do not audit public companies. So those who audit public companies will be administered by the AICPA. So this outlines, and you can see one of the biggest things here, that most of the firms that we're doing reviews on are 2 to 5 professionals. Page 6. This is probably the most statistical heavy page. But this is the stats on the types of reports that were accepted. So a pass report, a pass with deficiencies, or a fail type report in both system reviews and engagement reviews. The top section is system reviews, and from left to right, it's by year, 2010, 2011, 2012. And the bottom section are engagement reviews.
A quick review of this would indicate that in Tennessee, we don't perform as well as the AICPA as a whole.
The different columns, the TSCPA peer review program, those are folks who are not members of the AICPA. So I guess best way to state that is those who are not members of the AICPA are not faring as well as those who are.
Okay.
Page 7 is Exhibit C and is related only to system reviews. In a system review, I refer to the fact that they opine on the system of quality control. So this just simply gives you information on the reason for that report either being passed with deficiencies or a fail. On the left-hand side lists the areas that those deficiencies fall in. Either their quality control problem was human resources, leadership responsibilities, or what we call tone at the top. So reviewers have to categorize the deficiencies into one of these areas. What was the systemic cause of the problem found in the firm? And it falls in those categories on the left. So typically, it's monitoring or engagement performance are the highest categories for deficiencies. Did I make sense there? Okay.
I guess having seen this before, and I think everybody's had access to it, what I get from it is that it's a very robust program and comprehensive in how it's conducted and its professionalism.
I would, of
Members
course,
of the
agree.
board have questions or observations? I guess where this leads, Mark, the question, with this being done in the oversight that the TSCPA has of them, we have a rule that says we have to have a proc that goes over and does this again, or some version thereof. Or do they have such a specific guidelines as this?
Peer Review Oversight Committee is there to assure that the board has oversight of the peer review program. Remember, you don't have any other connection with the peer review program. That Oversight Committee is all that you have. And yet the board is the one responsible for this. So I think that's the reason for the Peer Review Oversight Committee. Does that answer your question, Bill?
Mark, it's my understanding the Peer Review Oversight Committee has never met.
No, they haven't met.
You've had a hard time getting people to serve on it.
I've had a hard time getting people. I've just now gotten the contracts approved.
Well, it's my understanding the reason they've never met is because there's nothing for them to do.
No, that's incorrect. There are
Is that
things for
not
them
right?
to do. Yeah.
So, I'm sorry?
There are things that they need to be doing.
Such
We can get
as?
the program up and running.
But if they can't have access to any of these records, how can they do their job?
The members of the Oversight Committee will sign confidentiality agreements, and they will have access and be able to sit in on any of our meetings. They can't then turn around and say firm XYZ had a fail report. They cannot tell you that. But they can come back and report to you in a similar manner as this report that I've shared with you.
Are those the arrangements that we have with them, that they will come back and report on an annual basis?
Yes, that's how it's supposed to work.
But they're not doing that, are they?
No, not yet. The members of the Peer Review Oversight Committee are Charlie Millsaps from East Tennessee, Joe Osterfeld from Middle Tennessee, and Kathy Sanborn from West Tennessee.
Charlie Millsaps told me that he was turning in his license at the end of this year.
Now I'll be looking for another person from East Tennessee.
I just received that same notice last week.
Yeah.
Thank you, Henry. That just made my day.
And do I understand that if we don't have a proc, that could impair mobility?
I think that the issue with mobility is that we don't have access to the peer reviews, so the other states are not comfortable in knowing that the peer review process is working properly in Tennessee. The PROC would alleviate some of those concerns, I believe.
Mark, I'm looking at the, I guess, accountancy law and rules, and looking at, under the peer review program, it's rule number 0020-06-.03, which talks about the review committee. Is that the rule you're saying requires us to have this committee? And if so, the language there almost reads to me like that rule is designed to say this committee is operating the whole peer review. I mean, it talks about the experience you got to have, and responsibilities the committee shall include developing procedures for the internal operation of the review. I mean, all of that is already done by the AICPA, or,
Yes, CPA.
I mean, does this, I guess what I'm saying, somewhere it looks to me like maybe we've delegated a lot of what's defined in this rule. We have delegated it to the TSCPA through the option of the AICPA peer review program and oversight. I mean, do we need a rule change here? I mean, I can see where we as a board might ought to have a committee, maybe even another committee of this board, because this is important. I mean, our firm's just been through PCAOB review and a peer review both in the last 90 days, and it's a pretty rigorous, robust thing, I tell you. I hate to see them coming, because you just got to stop serving clients and work on peer review, when they're there. So the program's working, but is this where we may need to look at what the rule says and maybe redefine what we ought to do as a board? Because I agree we need a connection, but maybe through a committee that would, again, look at all the other oversight that's going on and all the other quality controls that are there to make sure it's effective and doing what it needs to do, rather than the way this thing's written. It's almost like we need to have a committee that goes out and participates in these things, and I'm not sure we need to do that or bear the cost of doing that.
I agree, Casey. I'm not sure that we need to bear the cost or be that involved. So yes, we probably do need to be looking at a rule change as far as the PROC is concerned, but you do need that connection, I think.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Let me ask you a question. So if I'm understanding this correctly, the way with not having a peer review oversight committee potentially impacts our firm mobility, because like you said, somebody said other states are uncomfortable with us not knowing the results of the peer review.
Correct.
How does a PROC change that? Because they're going to sign a non-disclosure agreement. It's not like they can come back and say firm ABC did this and this and this. What am I missing there? How does that change anything?
I think your PROC can come back and say, you've got a significant problem here because you have 20% that are failing.
Is the issue with the mobility is that we aren't monitoring specific firms? Or what's the issue there? I guess I'm missing that.
I think the issue is that the board is not as involved in peer review and doesn't have access to the information as other states.
We're not going to have access to it anymore other than some statistics.
It's like saying that if another state decides that they want to do that every other state should follow suit. And that's never been the case with any of these boards.
That's true.
Just don't know that we're really gaining a whole lot. I mean, I'm not criticizing it at all. I'm just saying it's not like all of a sudden we're going to be revealed all this secret information or this private information that we aren't privy to. Private. Confidential, okay? Hidden.
Correct. I mean, having a PROC is something that you all need to look at.
I mean, what are we going to get out of that? We're going to get the statistics.
We're going to get more information, yes.
Which we would still could be privy to those statistics from, I assume the TSCPA would give that, just like what you presented to us here. I'm just trying to understand the purpose of we created more bureaucracy, or what.
Well,
if we can't get the board, that committee to meet in the first place, I mean.
That's because Wendy's taking all the good reviewers.
Yeah, we had a PROC, and quite frankly, when we went out trying to find people to serve in this area the last time we tried to get 3 people, it went for months, year, before we could even get qualified applicants. That was the problem.
Could this concern be addressed by us having better interaction interaction with the TSCPA and between the board, the staff, and them as to the review process, so we fulfill our obligation of peer review oversight?
I don't know, Bill. That's a good question. I don't know if the staff are the ones that need to be involved in this. If you have a peer review oversight committee, then you have someone who can sit in on the RAB and then come back and report to you, this is what I've observed.
What are they going to report? That's, again, I guess,
Here again, do you want to surrender all of that to the TSCPA?
as
Is
opposed to
basically-
surrender it to a volunteer board that we appoint?
That you have, well, you pay them, but yes, you appoint them.
Right, but I mean,
They're
I'm
supposed
just
to be a
trying,
third
I'm just
party.
trying to understand the process. I mean, I don't want to create another committee just for the heck of it. If it doesn't change anything, if we're not getting any more out of it, we're paying somebody to do something that we're not really gaining anything from. Because we can get the same statistics that they would give us, that this committee would give us, we would get it from the TSCPA. What else will be gained from this committee? I guess that's what I'm asking.
It's kind of like auditing the auditors. That's basically what you're doing.
So we have a committee that comes back to us and say they're doing a good job.
Yes.
This is like auditing the auditors of the auditors.
Auditors.
Another layer. I mean, I think the board needs to have a connection here, but I just don't, I mean, the way these duties are written up, I mean, it says this committee will assist in the selection and training of reviewers.
Can we go back to that for just a second, Mark? And maybe you can clarify, but
We need
all
a
of
rule
that
change
section of
here,
the
man,
rules was when the board had their own program.
Mm-hmm.
That's not related to the oversight. I don't think, is he reading from that section, Mark?
I think all of this is pretty much UAA,
Yeah.
but it was when the board, it was more important to you when the board had its own peer review committee.
Remind
still
the
a- still a
board as
rule.
to what we used to do.
What you used to do was you had your own review committee so that people, firms who were not members of the TSCPA had a program they could go to and be peer reviewed. We surrendered all that to the TSCPA in 2009 because we didn't have the adequate staff or knowledge to properly do that.
But we didn't change this rule.
But we didn't change the rule.
And that's
No.
what I'm saying. I think we could change this rule and still provide for that connection that we need to have somebody go over and participate in this oversight process at the right level without actually doing what this rule says we ought to do.
Exactly.
So you want to
need
kick
a
this back
rule.
to the Law and Rules Committee and have them review this?
That's it.
I mean, it looks like we already made the change in practice, we just have not changed the law.
Yes.
Okay.
And this might actually be another argument for the state-specific ethics to just circle back around. If folks that are providing that course in California, based on the rules, they're going to be thoroughly confused as to what goes on in Tennessee if someone who's not close to this understands what's going on.
Eldridge and Stewart, may I ask a stupid question? So is the thought, in at least as expressed, in the direction of not having a proc at all, and maybe having?
I'm in favor of having a proc of this board, a committee just like the enforcement committee or whatever, some group from here.
From this
that-
board.
Yeah, from this board
Right.
that we don't have to, go out and find licensed reviewers or whatever. We can simply be that connection between all the quality control that's going on, both through the AICPA and the TSCPA on this program by visiting and participating in some of these meetings, committee.
That hinder our
It-
independence if
Yeah.
if one of these cases comes before the board and they've got this confidential knowledge that they've signed, does that impairs their
If you review
decision-making?
NASBA's recommendations on a PROC, members of the board cannot be members of the PROC.
I'll withdraw that idea then. No, what does NASBA recommend that you?
NASBA recommends that the folks that are part of that PROC are qualified, and generally, I think we have it qualified to be a team captain. Is that correct?
Yes.
So to have the experience level that a team captain would have so they understand the program to serve on that PROC.
What do they recommend those duties would be? Would they be just,
Very similar to kind of what you saw here. I did not refer to them on your iPad, but you have a couple of checklists that I sent in that email and then also provided on the iPad. Those are the checklists that our oversight folks go through, and they're very similar, if not identical, to what NASBA suggests a PROC uses to perform oversight procedures. They're basically doing the same thing. It's just another review.
I think that makes sense, and but we still need rule change to, to get to that, do we not, Mark? I mean,
I think we do.
yeah.
So we are referring this to the Law and Rules Committee to work to how to address what it is that we aren't doing, or how do we get the rules and what we need to be in sync.
Chris, I wasn't making a recommendation. I was trying to understand the process of what we would gain out of paying these positions, what we get from having a PROC.
And I'm trying to understand the ultimate destination of where we're trying to go, and what the Law and Rules Committee is supposed to be steering us toward, because
I think preserving mobility, obviously, that's one thing, but also maintaining the highest standards for Tennessee CPAs. I mean, I think the peer review process that we have now works well. But if the way that it stands is going to have an impact on our mobility from other states, then obviously there's something that may need to be tweaked. But I'm not convinced one way or the other that the PROC is the correct way. I don't see, other than to audit the auditors, whatever the auditors auditing cubed or quad. If that's what we're getting, then that's, and it works, then I'm fine with it. I just want to make sure we do get some value out of money, rather than just spending money for no reason to have another layer of bureaucracy, and we get something out of it.
Have a recommendation for where we ought to go with this?
Not without consulting with Mark to get a better handle on exactly what the potential adverse impact, to Stephen's point, about the rules we have in place vis-a-vis mobility, and what we can do to make those changes. I think the confidentiality is kind of a separate issue of the peer review report, so I'd separate that out. But outside of the confidentiality part, if I can work with Mark to get some better idea of what we can do to make non-confidentiality changes to get us closer to the mobility goal, then I would be better suited to make a recommendation. So I'm happy to do that.
Is the mobility question, is it a possibility or is it a real issue?
In regard to
Us having a PROC or not having a PROC, you've mentioned that it could impair not having one could impair our mobility.
It is an issue because other states have raised that concern, in that if we don't have access to the peer reviews ourselves, we've got to have a strong oversight of the program itself to be sure that it's operating properly.
So what do other states in our situation do?
They have a PROC.
In form or substance?
Substance.
Okay. But we have a track record of having a very difficult, challenging time to get a PROC formed and function in an appropriate fashion.
Yes, Bill, and that is my challenge, especially with Charlie Millsap's turning in his license at the end of the year. That kind of threw me for a loop. Thank you, Henry. That means I'll have to start looking for someone in East Tennessee again. But yes, I think that we need to at least have the PROC.
As I'm sort of lost as to where we are, but I go back to the point, we're not following the rules that we have, so the rules need to be updated. And we need to come up with a practical way to address this oversight that a PROC is supposed to provide. Haven't been able to do that, but I don't know how we get to that point. But getting back to, well, we just got shot down on that because a member of this board can't provide that oversight. I was totally
I was just
with
going to
you.
make a suggestion, we reduce it from 3 members to 2 members since Charlie's turning in his license, but, being facetious, but why 3 members? I mean, does it, if we have a committee, it could be a couple of people, really. The key thing is, that, if you need that link, I mean, honestly, if you had the right person, one person can do the job, going
Right,
to
and
do
I
that.
don't think, I think it's what you all determine. I mean, we have a report acceptance body meet every month. Well, do they have to attend all of them? Probably not. So a couple of times a year, would that be sufficient type thing to give the feedback? That would be up to, I guess, either the board or the proc to decide what the appropriate level of contact is.
Casey, let me just, and this is a complete guess, but maybe they're saying a member from each grand division. Some of these rules were done pre-advent of the true electronic age in which
Yeah.
we live and are proceeding forward towards. So, maybe the thought was, okay, well, geographically speaking, it's easier on the proc members if they got to travel for East Tennessee member to go East Tennessee and so on and so forth. But if the board determined, hey, it might make, and Mark said, hey, it'd make it easier to get 3 people if the geographic limitations weren't in place. I don't think that's provided for in the statute, so you could just say 3 members and strive to ensure grand division, but not require, or something.
Yeah.
I mean, just things like that are practical and could be addressed by rule under the statutory authority umbrella to make it easier to fill out and start operating the proc.
Just bringing it to some conclusion, Mark, could you revisit the situation and come up with a practical recommendation, working with the Law and Rules Committee to address what we need to have and have the rules follow what we're trying to do in order to fulfill the responsibility?
Yes, sir, we can do that.
Mark, is there any budgeting issues here to pay these people?
It is in the budget, Henry.
Okay.
We do pay for when they actually meet. It's not like a retainer for being on the committee. You have to meet to get paid, correct?
Yes.
They get paid more than we do.
Yes, they do.
Resign and join the proc.
And a good place to find maybe proc members or somebody to work in this capacity could be former board members.
Yes, I agree. If they have the qualifications to be team captain.
And I think the one thing that might cause some folks to fall short of the requirements would be that they weren't reviewers, but they have all the A&A background. Those people could potentially take the 2-day intro course to understanding the peer review program, and that would qualify them to be a team captain, whether they choose to do reviews or not. A partner with the A&A backgrounds, should be able to perform that function.
Qualify them to be a team captain?
Well, you have to meet other experience requirements, but typically an A&A partner has met those requirements. So you have to be an A&A for at least 5 years. You have to meet certain CPE requirements, a little above typical, and you have to have taken the training course, and you have to be partner level to be a team captain.
It just seems to me as we're redefining what we do here that I think it'd be difficult for us to go out and find people that could be better reviewers than the people that are already doing it. To me, the more important thing here is for somebody that can look at the quality control process that's going on right now and say, are there any gaps there? Are we doing all the right things? Is there the right segregation between people performing the reviews and people reviewing the reports and accepting the reports? And, is the process working, and are all the quality control elements there that we need to be there? More so than saying I'm qualified to go out and do a peer review, is to know that we've got the right person on board that's going out and doing those things.
Right.
So, Bill, I'm gonna hush. I've said too.
So maybe evaluating who could be on our committee might also be a good thing to look at, because I agree. I'm not sure they need to be that high. We're really, right.
Very good. Any further discussion needed? Mark and the committee are going to work together and come up with.
Sure.
Thank you, Wendy. Though that concludes our agenda, are there any more issues that need to be brought up?
There is one issue that I'd like for you to review. On your iPad, it's the AICPA invitation to comment. This is in regard to the practice analysis that the AICPA is doing on the CPA exam. They are asking that boards and societies respond to this practice analysis questionnaire. There are only a couple of questions on here, but Mr. Chairman, I would like one or two volunteers to work with me to draft answers on behalf of the board, so that we can submit a response to the practice analysis.
Would like to volunteer to help?
I'll volunteer.
Great.
Volunteer.
Henry? Okay, good.
That's super.
You have this stuff on paper that's on here?
On
Have you
paper?
sent it to us? Have y'all previously sent it to us?
No, but I'll send it to you.
Do what?
You didn't get it?
I don't know if I got it or not. I'm not sure.
We also, just for my comfort, do one more thing and have the board vote to authorize Mr. Crocker to sign the agreed order in the matter that was set for formal hearing today, but is now going to be settled. Typically, if it went through the formal hearing process, it would have to be signed by the board chair unless they delegated that authority to Mr. Crocker. So just for safety reasons, if we could do the same thing here, that would be helpful.
Entertain a motion to authorize Mark to fulfill that responsibility.
So moved.
So moved. Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
There are no other matters to come before the board. We stand adjourned. Thank you very much.
Bill?
Hey, I thirded the motion. I thirded the motion. You got me out 7 minutes before my conference call.
4 minutes after mine.
Yes, I just got one too.